Cool, great. If you've been enjoying this content, that follow button right now. If you are new to my channel, hit that follow button. Make sure notifications are on so you know I'm going live. Exclamation point social in chat for our social media. We got Twitter, retweet, Discord, where we have all our conversations, TikTok, and YouTube, where you'll find the VODs in their totality. So like, comment, and subscribe over on our YouTube page, right? And super chats and all that stuff. All very, very much helpful. Okay, we are going on to our next topic. So I hear someone typing, so I don't know who it is, but like
Me.
all right. The effect of Florida's "Don't Say Gay" bill is being felt. Teachers across the state are getting conflicting guidance on how the law will be enforced. In this confusion, educators are deciding to shy away from LGBTQ signifiers that are actually allowed by the law. Is this simply the fault of school administrators or state regulators to explain the law? Or do you think that this confusion was the true purpose of the law? So yeah, I saw an article about this, and this is, well, exactly what I predicted. And what many people predicted is that, like, there is... people won't understand the bill, however the bill is written, but that it'll have a damaging effect on people's self-expression and what they're willing to share within the classroom, and it'll just have a chilling effect. So, but is this not actually the intention? Is this just like, hey, you guys just don't know? It's a matter of your own ignorance. That's it. So let's start with our friend Attic, please.
You really chose me to go first. That's crazy. All right, look. Don't Say Gay bill, I think maybe that might have been its intention, and if its intention, it's a good one. I think when you start talking about things like teaching young kindergartners and things about sexuality and stuff, I think it's absolutely wild. I mean, I'm pretty sure we all went through kindergarten. I don't think many of us had a bunch of questions about sexuality and homosex or any of those kinds of things at that age. I don't understand why we're thinking that we need to start creating curriculum around that. That's what the Don't Say Gay bill told them that they could not do. And I think it's a good thing that they told them that. The fact that it's making people uncomfortable is probably like right in line with what the wishes were of the people who actually voted for that bill. So I think it's actually probably achieving its desired effects, and I think it's a good thing.
Much for that. All right. We'll have that fight in a second. Let's go to Scott.
Yeah, I don't really understand this weird thing of confusion. It seems like groomer cope to try and act like this is like some like really bad thing and that it's super nebulous, like laws aren't fucking written nebulous every single fucking time, and it's the executive it's the executive branch that usually determines like what the actual guidelines are. This bill was obviously written to do that. And it's also like, while it does allow parents to sue, there is this clarification in, sorry, let me find it real quick. CSCS HB 1557, where they explain the process is that a parent reports a presumed violation, and then the school has 30 days to respond as to why they believe it's not a violation or to correct the situation. Then if the parent is still displeased, they go to the Department of Education for Florida and have a magistrate appointed as a neutral party to be able to determine whether or not this is a violation, whether or not it fits in lines, whether or not the school administration needs to change things. And these are kind of the things that lead up to towards an evidence of whether or not like a lawsuit is going to be able to like gain any precedence or gain any ground. I mean, I'm sure Lactoid can kind of like add more to this. This is just my reading as a layman, but I feel like that all of these systems are in place for the very reason to not allow that, right? And local school boards are, have time to set up what the policies are and to make more detailed things so that parents can have that conversation. It really just sounds like leftist cope trying to pretend like this bill that they shouted from the mountaintops would ruin everything and destroy things hasn't actually done anything except stop groomers from talking about fucking, crazy sexual relationships to second graders. And now they're just trying to make up excuses, even though I feel like the law is pretty explicit and actually has tons of like checks and balances, both from the parents' perspective and the state, to make sure that this goes swimmingly. So yeah, it just seems like bullshit.
So I actually think this is more of an issue of just what we've seen constantly, which is I think it's a catastrophe. It's a catastrophizing everything that happens, right? In this case, and I think it's been somewhat recently coming from the left side of the political aisle. With Roe v. Wade, we have a lot of people who still hold the belief that the Dobbs decision illegalized abortion nationwide. They firmly believe this, and even though it's just like very easily searchable, it's just not true. There's still plenty of people like who go on TV, like political pundits, who say like, if the other men had been white, they wouldn't have been shot by Rittenhouse. Well, and it's like, again, just like very basic research would like yield this information, but because the media, I think is just so hyper partisan hackery is how I would describe it, right? The confusion itself, I mean, clearly it wasn't the true purpose of the law here. The purpose of the law was to protect children from a political agenda, whether you think it does or doesn't. That's what the purpose was, clearly. And the fact that so many people are misled by, I think, the media and political pundits and chants and movements and protests, I think is really speaks to the infuriating hackery expressed by media and said political pundits. So please do your own research on things before you change your behavior.
Rory, please.
Yeah, well, I'm a filthy Canadian, so I'm a little bit of an outsider. So I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert on United States school curriculum at the lower levels or any level whatsoever, except for maybe university. But as far as I can tell, but I'm open to being educated. Of like, uh, the law is having its intended effect in terms of like designed to shut down conversation. Like Fanatic brought up of like I don't know the exact curriculum that kindergartners received, but I don't think they were like, is this bill actually addressing something or a problem that was occurring of like, whatever, homosexual sex was actually being spoken about at a kindergarten level. If that's actually happening, I would agree there's a conversation to be had. But it seems like based off of the framing of this bill, like it's not actually addressing a problem, and it's like mostly just there to stop conversations from happening. And since these conversations happen to be difficult for a certain demographic, well, or rather, these conversations happen to challenge a certain demographic. They don't want to have that conversation to happen. And I'll end it there for now.
Yeah, so the Don't Say Gay bill is unconstitutionally vague. I've held this position ever since we first started talking about the bill. And it's intentionally unconstitutional vague. The intention is it is so vague that you don't know what's right and what's wrong. And it needs to be taken to the courts. It needs to be struck down. If they are wanting a law, it has to be very specific on what is legal and what's not illegal. Sorry, what is legal and what's not legal. To ensure that the American citizens know whether they're committing a crime or not. So no, I think this is intentionally unconstitutionally vague. I think that this is the intention. And I think this needs to be struck down in the courts. It's obviously not a good law. It's provided to cause this confusion, and look forward to seeing it taken to court and actually getting through one.
LSP coming at us at 10 frames per second because his computer cannot handle his background. Go ahead.
I just want to say, based Sprouticus. Oh my god. This man is just spitting rhymes, guys. You gotta love it. Yeah, this law is badly written, and it's obviously designed to cause confusion and have a chilling effect. The reason this law was so widely condemned as bigoted is exactly due to the framing that people like Fanatic gave it. He asks, like, why do we need to be teaching kindergartners sexuality? As if the only way you could teach about gay people was by teaching how gay people have sex. This is a stigma that being gay carries. You're a sex-crazed deviant who is preying on little kids. Like that's the stereotype people think of when they think about teaching this stuff. This law is designed to stop people from discussing gay or trans people in the classroom. Plain and simple, since there's nothing wrong with being gay or trans, there's nothing wrong with talking about gay or trans people in the class in appropriate and inappropriate and instructive ways from any age. I'm sorry, I'm like stuttering here. There is no reason gay or trans people need to be hidden from kindergartens. They're part of society. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's no reason to lie by omission to children about that which they have a right to know about.
Okay. So two things that just people said before me that I agree or disagree with. Spartacus said that the law was vague. I agree with that. And I think that that has issues that I'll get to in a minute. But LSP said that this was designed to have a chilling effect. I don't think so. I think it was designed to do nothing. And it was designed instead to make the left overreact to it so that they could make this the primary talking point instead of other things that they'd rather not talk about. And the reason I say that is because this reminds me a lot of a bunch of laws that we've had in Texas over the past. It reminds me of the CRT law that was passed here in Texas. At first, we all were concerned about, well, what's going to happen now? Because CRT comes up a lot of times in high school academic debate. You know, what are we going to have to do? We went and downloaded the law right away as soon as it got passed. And it turns out all the law said was that you can't teach that one race is superior to another. And I can tell you right now that if you were to teach that one race is superior to another in Texas high schools, you would have been fired anyway, long before this law. So that law really, actually, as it happens, turned out to do nothing. This law is not quite the same as that, but it does have some problems with vagueness. And one of them is in the text of the law, it says that classroom instruction about sexual orientation to K through 4 students is prohibited. Okay, that I can see not causing problems because that's the kind of instruction that they wouldn't get anyway. But then if you go to the preamble of that same law, it instead of saying classroom instruction, it says classroom discussion. And that's where a lot of this argument is coming from people who are reacting to the law, because a discussion can happen as a result of a student just asking a question. And then when legislators asked later on, as they were trying to pass this law, what does this mean? Like, can you give us some specifics on what that kind of instruction would look like and how can you react to it? And the lawmaker just said, well, look up the definition of the word. Like, that was it. They couldn't give any indication of what would trigger that law and what wouldn't trigger that law, what should be allowed, what shouldn't be allowed. And when the framers of the law themselves can't tell you what the law means, then, you know, what chance does a teacher have trying to interpret the law for their own classroom? I don't think this is intended to pass court muster. I just think it's intended to make DeSantis look tough on some issues that I think it was up to him. He'd rather none of those cases ever go to court because he just wants to look like he's doing something with regards to this instead of actually doing it. There's also a second part of this law that a lot of people are missing, and that is, yeah, it's K through 12 is the mandatory parts of the bill. The other part of the bill, which is also very vague, is the one that says, okay, if you're above 4th grade, you can only teach it if it's age appropriate. You can't teach any age inappropriate, but it doesn't define what's age appropriate. And so it you know, even if you're high school seniors who are at a debate tournament where this stuff comes up all the time, nobody knows if any given debate case that gets run at a tournament on a Saturday is going to trigger this law or if it won't. And I agree that it was vague on purpose because it's designed to make it so that teachers don't know which, you know, whether they can illustrate these things or not. Although I can tell you that kids at high school debate tournaments don't give a shit. They're going to talk about what they're going to talk about.
And then last but not least, a very well-known ally of the
many trans friends. It's true. So yeah, I think it's really stupid to say that the "Don't Groom Kids" bill is confusing people as if it's like, you know, a point against it. Yeah, it's a new law. There's going to be some confusion as to how to enforce this thing. let them work out the confusion, right? One of the examples given is that there was a workshop, and at this workshop, kindergarten teachers were told in a hypothetical discussion, they got the impression that they weren't allowed to have pictures of their significant others or private flags in the classroom. And so they said, "Hey, district, are we allowed to have pictures of our significant others and private flags in the classroom?" And the school district said, "Yeah, you can have pictures of your significant others." And that's it. Like there was confusion. They figured out, hey, yeah, this only applies to classroom instruction. You can have pictures of your same-sex spouse or whatever. That's totally fine. And then you move on, right? Like this seems, yeah. There's confusion. It's coming from people on the left, people in the media who want to catastrophize this, who want you to think that the Republicans are coming after the transies and the gays and et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, even calling this the "Don't Say Gay" bill again and again and again, when this clearly not what is in the bill. It doesn't seem like that's the intention of the bill, and it's not what the bill is doing in like an action. Right? People are still allowed to say that they're gay, so let's have their same-sex partners' pictures in the classrooms. It's totally fine. I think that what's going on right now is we have a lot of people who are there's an outsized like political force, political power, right, within the LGBT community, compared to any other oppressed group in the United States. They have so much fucking influence, so much power to get things done, to shame people, to get them canceled, quote unquote, to push legislation. Because the moment you push back against their ideology, you're a fucking monster. And I think this kind of brain rot, being pushed by these mentally ill ideologues who admit again and again and again that they are, in fact, targeting the most vulnerable people in our society, the children, and their obsession to deconstruct traditional gender norms. We need to fight against it. You need to say, hey, that's enough. You got to slow the fuck down, right? It's okay that you are a fucking gendered fairy, whatever the fuck, xenogender, but you don't get to push that on our kids. I think it's totally fine.
Okay, so there was a couple of statements on the legal side of things. There was a couple statements made about how it was unconstitutionally vague. So the two sections that I have written down, the only two sections were identified, were the difference between the preamble where it says discussion and the prescription, which says instruction, and then also the kind of vagueness of when it says age appropriate, determination of reckless, or determination of basically like what is age appropriate is not like properly put forward, right?
The second half depends on the definition of age appropriate. The entire second half of the bill depends on that singular definition. So if that singular definition is therefore vague, the entire bill is unconstitutionally vague, considering half of it's unconstitutionally vague. The entire bill is going to be thrown out by a court because it's unconstitutionally vague.
So
It's not true.
Well, here's the problem, right? The standard for something being unconstitutionally vague is pretty easy. When I say pretty easy to meet, it's also difficult to meet, but it's easier to meet when it comes to criminal cases. When we're talking like civil, or like in this case, literally prescribes them like a magistrate,
right?
It normally doesn't even apply. Like it only applies in very rare circumstances in which something can be like unconstitutionally vague. So this idea that the courts are just going to strike it down, that's not a guarantee. They would have to like determine that, strict scrutiny applies. They would have to determine that like there's some group that is being like.
One second. According to the U.S. Supreme Court in Connolly versus General Construction Company in 1926, a law is unconstitutionally vague when people of common intelligence must necessarily guess at its meaning.
Wait. When you said law, it's actually says right here a criminal statute.
No, it's quote from quote. The Connolly versus General Construction Company. You probably look at the 1940 case. Connolly versus General Construction Company. A law is unconstitutionally vague when people of common intelligence must necessarily guess at its meaning.
Yeah, it was a criminal case. Syllabus.
Okay,
Number one, a criminal statute, which this is the syllabus, a criminal statute which either forbids or requires the doing of an act in terms so vague that men of common intelligence must guess at its meaning and differ as to its application lacks the first essential of due process of law. It comes from the due process clause, right? Which is a criminal, which it applies in criminal cases.
Wait,
So-
no. Due process is not just criminal cases.
Well, hold on. You're right. It's not just criminal cases, but like when it's applied outside of criminal cases, the bar is very high. Most of the time, it's usually like severe racial discrimination stuff. Like that's usually when they apply that, right? But other than that, like most of the time, it's just limited to criminal. We're taking it like as a given that they're just going to strike this down based on it being unconstitutionally vague. When I don't think there's like any there's any precedent for that to happen.
First off,
Not only that,
it was about loitering, right? You realize it was about loitering, right?
And then the second thing is, I think that I mean, even if that was the case, like I think the law said it, people of common intelligence. I understand like people like Sproudicus are going to struggle with this, but for the rest of us with actual common intelligence, it makes all the sense in the world. You read it's very plain language. We know exactly what the freak it says. We know what classroom instruction is. They said just look up the dang words. I don't know why we're trying to pretend that there's some
What's age appropriate mean?
I don't know why we're trying to pretend that there's some proprietary. I don't know why we're trying to pretend that there's some proprietary definition. I don't know why we're trying to pretend that there's some proprietary. Exactly. Shut the hell up. I don't know why. I don't know why we're. I don't know.
Hey, let Fanatic get his point out.
Thank you. He's telling you to shut the hell up.
Hey, Prime.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why we're sitting here pretending as if these words have some proprietary definitions of some sort. We know what the hell instruction is. We know what age appropriate is. We know what all of these phrases mean. So when this thing was in really plain language, it wasn't in some crazy like esoteric legalese. So yeah, it makes all the sense in the world. I think what everyone has been saying thus far, that it sounds like everybody's just trying to look for some excuse to go off and pretend that they don't understand. That's what's happening here. And I'm not here for it. We know what this bill is. And I can't understand why anyone thinks it'd be appropriate to be teaching kindergartners about sexuality. And for those of you guys who misunderstood me, I won't call anyone out, but you know who you are, the imbecile. When I said the word sexuality, that doesn't mean I'm talking about sex acts. That's not what sexuality means. If you need a dictionary, get one. They're free online. Go to Google, look up what the word sexuality means. It doesn't require you talking about sex acts. What I said is it doesn't make any sense to be teaching kindergartners or first graders about sexuality. And I stand by that. You idiot.
Yeah, what I think is really interesting is
I get my chance. Thank you.
We will go to Sprout. We'll go to LSP. And Corey, I think you had your hand up. Sorry, I'll get it. Just go, Sprout. I got a hold of it.
So, Fanatic, stop being disingenuous. First grade and kindergartners in the first half of the bill, where it's not discussing age appropriate. So, what does age appropriate mean from third grade forward?
I would say that the same way that we've already determined what is age appropriate, it's going to be there's probably going to be curriculum where they're going to end up determining what where they will outline it, just like they did in the state of California, where they said within this grade they should learn these things, within this grade they should learn these things, and so on and so forth. That's up for the school board to decide, right? But we know what the phrase means, and the school board typically already has curriculum that clearly exemplifies what age appropriateness is.
That's not in the bill.
So
I
wait,
mean,
it doesn't. Of course, no. I'm sorry.
The bill is going to provide parents the ability to sue schools based
take
on
this
age
hell, man.
appropriate. So, what is age appropriate?
I can clarify.
Okay, let me respond.
No,
Let me respond really quickly.
so-
Let me respond really quickly.
No, there's
So look, it's really
USC
simple.
State Statute 675 has definition.
Thank you. Can you
Also-
link that, please?
Federal laws
Link
with
that. And then,
definitions of age
I don't know why you guys are under this misconception, and I get it. You're really smart, and it really boils down to like this belief system that somehow this bill is going to outline every single iota of it, as if some of these things aren't like literally based on other logical and legal precepts, right? Like, so if you're now saying, well, what does it say? What is technically a classroom? What technically is instruction? What technically is What technically is age? What does age mean? Are we talking about Mesozoic era age? What are we talking about, you idiot? We know what the freak these words mean. Again, the only reason any person is going to be confused about this are either people who are not intelligent enough to be involved in this conversation, or people who really actually understand what the hell is going on, but just want to be disingenuous because they want to go ahead and get their way. Those are the only
Real quick. I'm just gonna add. I'm just gonna add real quick. There are tons of laws that use the phrase reasonable, and they don't define that because there's already legal precedence for what reasonable is defined. You do not define every single fucking word in law when there are already things that define these words. And for example, in 42 USC state statute 675 parentheses 11, there's already a federal standard for what is age or developmentally appropriate. And there's a whole list of things what that means.
Where is it?
So what individual actions mean?
You sending it to me. Where is it?
Sure.
Let's go through it. Where is it?
Oh my fucking God. You're
this
is a game that you play.
Finish.
I just said I will do when I'm done finishing my fucking sentence.
This product doesn't know how to shut the hell up. He just can't do it.
Do you, fanatic?
You've outspoken me by like 20 times this panel. Shut up. Shut
You talk over everybody and
shut
panel.
up. Shut the hell up.
Shut up. I'm not gonna shut up. You
Scott,
keep talking.
Shut up.
I'm not gonna shut up.
Hey, stop. Yo, hey guys, knock it off. What's going on here? Knock it off.
I'm just showing how childlike he is. That's all.
Scott,
I'm just chilling.
Finish your point, and then I got to get to LSP, who had like a direct response. And don't worry, I got everyone else on the list.
So here's just one example, since you need it immediately, so that you can try and like figure out some way to weasel stupidly into a misunderstanding of a definition, so that you can like think you're getting a W when really everyone realizes that you just can't fucking read. Again, here's just one example in law where the word is defined. And so you don't need to define every single fucking word, because if you did that, all of our bills would be insanely too difficult to understand. And that's why we have these things called lawyers. Someone happens to be a lawyer on this fucking panel. So if you're confused by the definition of reasonable or state or age appropriate and how it applies to a bill that sets up a magistrate and says that rules need to be defined by school districts and gives all of these different ways so that people can understand what is age appropriate in the fucking bill, and you just want to say that that's vague and that somehow makes it unconstitutional, like it's just a shit argument, bro. Just take the L.
So we got to move forward.
He won't take the L.
We got to move forward. Okay, so and yeah, send the thing. Put it in the group DM so we can all take a look at that, please.
It's literally already in the chat.
Okay, thank you so much. A little bit. Thank you for gifting us up to Joe Lewis. All right, so let's go to LSP. Corey, Doobie, Aiko, and then yeah. Did I put your? Okay, I got you.
Fuck. So much. I don't know where to start. I don't know how people so retarded can be so condescending. It's actually like a talent to me. Yeah, I guess we'll start with this this idea that teaching kindergartners about sexuality is like inappropriate or wrong or anything like that. One of the first things you learn in kindergarten and first grade is you learn about the family unit, right? You learn about people's families so that you can get a better grasp of like the different ways you connect with other people in society. And there are gay families, and there are families with trans children and trans parents and trans siblings and trans whatever. Like, this is a thing that just exists. Nobody is hurt by explaining this or being inclusive to this, or even educating people who don't know what this means, what this is. And to suggest otherwise is just ignorant moral panic, which is the majority of what I see. It's just ignorant moral panic. Okay, there you go.
Oh, did you think that meant something? Nigga, what? Nigga, what? You think that was a burn?
Let's go to.
Did he just call me a nigga? Did he just call me a nigga? Totally.
No, he said you. No, I think he just said you tell me.
No, he said nigga. He
definitely
said nigga what right back.
I believe ignorant. Or, well, I could be wrong.
Someone clip that.
You'll get over it.
Clip that. Someone clip that. If he did, he got to give, because that's bannable. That's bannable. That's a bannable offense, because you're not allowed to be out here.
I hope LSP didn't.
Yeah,
LSP
did.
Okay, it's
fine. He did. Someone clip it.
Yeah, I said nigga what right back.
Thank you.
Is he allowed to say?
Go ahead and kick this.
Say nigga what to me?
Can you kick this nigga from the panel?
See?
Can you kick this nigga from the panel?
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's unreasonable.
Really?
It's not unreasonable. That's a bannable offense. It's a bannable offense. It's a bannable offense.
No.
Nah, that's ridiculous.
It's a bannable offense by the TOS. Freak out of here.
That's actually ridiculous.
It's a bannable offense. I don't care what you think is ridiculous.
who?
TOS is a bannable offense.
Hey,
If
whoa.
nothing else,
Let's
you have
not
to
go down
protect
this
the
line.
channel.
You get to
Whoa, wait, guys, stop it. We're not going to go down this line, right? Because I know what's going to happen. Someone else is going to test this shit. I like LSP a lot,
Right on the edge.
and I hate the fact that I had to do that. But I don't make these fucking rules, all right? Twitch does. Okay, so please knock it off. Let's knock off this discussion. We're moving past it. Thank you. All right. So let's who is next on the list? Let's go to Corey.
Yeah, I'll probably just springboard off of what Ellen, not saying that word, by the point they were making. Where so Fnatic, out of curiosity, so you mentioned, okay, that sure, fair enough, age appropriate. We have some sort of like intuitive understanding of what that means.
Sure.
And so when it comes to the legislation of this bill, okay, and it seems like your concern stems from like, okay, well, children in kindergarten, for example, shouldn't be taught about, sexuality, or basically to maybe frame it more broadly, children at whatever kindergarten should not be taught things or informed about things that are age inappropriate. I would ask, do you have any sort of clear examples or evidence that, children on some sort of widespread scale were being taught things that were age inappropriate? And my follow-up question would be like, why is sexuality, based off of your definition dictionary, why is that age inappropriate for, let's say, for example, a kindergarten or a grade 1?
I don't think that it has to be based off of my particular standpoint. I think it's just based off of what's generally accepted, right? Because I think that's what's within the law or within the legal term of of age or developmentally appropriate. So for me, I'm not going to go to my own personal definition or my own personal belief system or anything crazy like that. I think we just use the law. And the law basically, we use what's generally accepted. And I think most people, obviously, that bill was incredibly favorable in the state of Florida. Like most people think that it's inappropriate to be teaching kindergartners about transgenderism or sexuality and whatever. I think we all went through school not learning about sexuality. That was not part of the curriculum growing up. I mean, I'm probably older than most of you guys here, but that just wasn't part of the curriculum. And we were perfectly fine. I don't understand why we would need to start changing the curriculum in this way. And it does seem like there is some sort of aim at grooming when you get to the point where people start saying, no, I think that we should be able to teach children, kindergartners, about sexuality. Plenty of parents feel like that's inappropriate, and so then that's I don't have to get any more specific than that. That's enough.
Yeah, so if I may ask, because just sort of my original, do you have are there clear cases or examples of children being taught age inappropriate things? Sort of my question is what is the reason then for this bill?
Oh my God! Yes,
I got you specifically. So what was happening was there was inside of the classroom. They had a policy that the thing that encouraged them to do this bill in the first place was a policy in which a school was saying that if a child was questioning their gender or their sexuality, that the school was not to tell the parents, but was to affirm that kid's gender or that kid's sexuality. So if a kid decide, hey, my name is no longer going to be Carl, it's now going to be Carla, and I'm transgender, the staff and teachers and administrators were encouraged, or I'm sorry, the policy demanded or dictated that they have to refer to that child as Carla. However, when the parent is around, you are not to refer to that kid as Carla. You refer to them as whatever the parents refer to them as, or whatever's on their birth certificate, whatever their government name is, right? And so that right there seems like what you were doing was you were trying to sneak something past the parents. You were intentionally encouraging specific behavior from kids and encouraging staff to be deceptive with parents. That's what actually caused them to want to do this bill, so that schools can no longer incentivize staff to do that, because that's obviously disgusting, right?
Well, so I don't want to hog the entire conversation, but based off of that example that you outlined, it seems like that is potentially for the protection of the child, as in bad parents exist. I think we can all acknowledge that.
Sure, that's inappropriate. It's inappropriate for you guys. Is it inappropriate for a school to be making healthcare decisions for people's children without consenting with their parents? Obviously.
Yeah,
so that's why you need the bill.
Yeah, but then it sort of at least doesn't make sense to me in terms of if the example that you gave of the child that you outlined, it seems like they're already aware of sexuality as a concept if they're questioning their gender. And so then to me, it shouldn't make sort of sense that then the conversation about it's age appropriate to talk about sexuality in that context.
I would say then if that's the thing, obviously considering how confusing and absolutely critical to a child's mental health and well-being that this thing would be, that you would obviously consult with the parents so that way you're not sending conflicting information to the child from a classroom and now inculcating them with values that are different from the parents and causing some sort of more dysphoria or more confusion or distorting whatever the goals of those parents are. I would say that that would probably be more appropriate. And if you think as an educator who's only going to be dealing with this child for no more than 9 months that you're more informed or more able to actually determine long-term health decisions for freaking children that the parents are going to be dealing with for the rest of their lives, I obviously can see why that would be absolutely inappropriate or crazy, right? So that's why you need laws like this to prevent teachers from thinking that they can assume this role for this 9 months, and then when the kid goes on to the rest of their lives, they're now washing their hands of a situation that they created.
I mean, I have more to say, but I'll let others speak.
Okay.
Next person is Doobie Aiko Lactoid.
Can you pass me for now, please?
Oh sure.
Pretty
Okay.
please.
Aiko Lactoid.
Yeah. Okay. So there was something else I was going to say, but before I do, I just want to respond to when Fanatic said we don't need to define age appropriate because, and he's right about this, the definitions of what's age appropriate already exist in the curricula K through 12. They're all over the place. Not talking about this from the point of view of a lawyer or anyone who understands the Florida State Constitution or the United States Constitution any better than a lawyer would, but I'm coming at this from the point of view of somebody who has to interpret the rules from the point of view of a teacher in the classroom. If we're going to go by the already the definition of age appropriate as it existed before the law, if we're going to say, well, we don't have to define it because it was already defined, then you have to ask one thing, and that is, was the stuff age appropriate before, right? If your answer is yes, then the pre-existing definitions then become invalid because the law changes that. The law now says what was considered age appropriate in law before that now no longer is, and therefore I would argue new definitions have to be made because you're invalidating the old ones. And if the answer is no, then we're back to what I said before about CRT laws, and this is also true with the anti-CRT laws, the anti-Sharia laws that came before that they're kind of meaningless, right? Because if you're just going to rely on the old definitions of what's age appropriate, then this law doesn't change anything. One of those two things has to be true, and I don't know. I don't know. As a teacher, you have to either continue to abide by the existing definitions that existed before this law, or you have to define age appropriate with regards to this new law. It's got to be
I
one
don't
or the
think
other.
I don't think so, and I think the reason why is because like so a lot of times these things are like really heavy-handed by like schools, right? Where like if you were to poll the average American, or if you're I'm sorry, the average Floridian, right? Like all of them would say, like, yeah, no, we're not in favor of this kind. Not all. The vast majority of them would say that it's not generally accepted for them to be instructing parents in this way, right? But the problem was that schools kind of getting with this with some ideological bends are going to start making these kind of ideas, right? Where it's like, I think it's good to start like grooming these kids into all of this other nonsense that parents were never in favor of. And the schools are just being usurpacious and saying, well, we're going to do it, and and you won't know, and you're not even allowed to ask whether or not we're teaching these children these things because it's part of healthy instruction and so on and so forth. And so the parents and the lawmakers are listening to the parents and fighting back to be able to say, wait a minute, we're not going to allow you to do this. They've polled people. Clearly, people are not in favor of this. So this isn't generally accepted. It was just that the school was doing heavy-handed, so they created a law to be able to say, no, now we're going to make sure that it has to be something that's generally accepted. So that way you can't just decide as a school, we'll do whatever the freak we want. And I think
Is
that
it
makes
not-
sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But is it fair for teachers? I'm not talking about people who are hostile to the law necessarily. Is it fair for teachers to ask for clarification from lawmakers?
Of course, and I think with any law, you're always allowed to do that, and you're in fact encouraged to do that. And they've already had meetings in which the law was already being taught, in which they were already being able to have workshops to try to work through these things, as was in the article that we were talking about, so that they can get all the clarification that they need. And of course, anytime you have a brand new law, there's always going to be confusion about how things are going to be instituted and so on and so forth. And I think that that's perfectly fair, but I think it's a little bit ridiculous to start trying to cry that they're doing us so wrong and that there's like some sort of malfeasance happening or some sort of nonsense. It's just like, no. This is a brand new law. It's going to be, there's going to be some rough patches where we're trying to figure out exactly what this means and exactly how to institute everything and the limitations and the scope of it. And that's perfectly fine. And you'll get that, like as someone pointed out earlier, you asked the question, is this okay? What? It sounds like they're saying we can't say the word gay. Of course, no, you can actually say the word gay. It sounds like we can't have pictures of our partners on our desk. No, you can have pictures of your partner on your desk. You can be hyper reactive if you want to as a defeatist and limit yourself on the things that you can do. That's your prerogative, but that's not a problem with the bill. That's a problem with your reading comprehension. No one thought that. I never thought that. We've had plenty of conversations about this bill and what it stands for and what it means. I'm so glad Joe Lewis is here because he's a real nigga. I think we've had all of these conversations. No one here questioned whether or not anyone would be able to do those photos. The only people who are questioning that are the hyper reactive activists who are trying to pretend that they don't understand the scope and trying to push the idea that the scope of the bill is undefined and going way too far so that they can actually try to get some sympathy. That's the only thing that's going on here.
I'm not really talking about the photos. I'm just talking about the word discussion in the preamble.
But I can find that part, but we already know what the instruction part is. Let me read the discussion
Let's
part.
go to Lactoid, Scott, Corey, Joe.
Yeah, so I was going to address the discussion versus instruction part. As to the, I'm not an expert in Florida law. I actually wasn't aware that they had that definition of age appropriate. I for the point that was made of, well, was it age appropriate before? Obviously, the bill has determined that it wasn't. I think that's a good point, that this is somewhat still maybe like arguably vague in some way. I don't think it's nearly vague enough to that would, just telling you from my experience, I don't think it's vague enough that would justify getting rid of it or that overturning it. And I don't think it's even close, right? The standard necessary to overturn for a non-criminal, when the bill actually has like a section where it states it's going to provide, like, you must provide a magistrate to be making these calls. I just don't see it happening. I think that's an interesting argument for it being vague. I just don't see it as powerful enough, especially because it's even less vague than I thought it was, because they do have a paragraph describing what age appropriate means. So I think I'm even more convinced now that it won't be overturned. As to discussion versus instruction, again, like, the preamble isn't necessarily laying out the directives of the law, right? That's what the underlying directives are doing. And so I don't think just that simple difference in words between discussion as like the overall goal is to like limit this kind of discussion, and then when it gets down to like, well, how are we going to do this? We're going to limit instruction this way. And like specifically, they use the word instruction when they lay out the specific prohibitions, right? They don't lay out,
Right.
they don't use instruction when it comes to like the age appropriate thing. They use instruction when it comes to, you may not teach this to kindergartners through third grade. That's when they use the word instruction. So, I mean, that's pretty clear, right? That specific subsection doesn't. I don't think that's going to be the one open to attacks for being unconstitutionally vague.
Let's go.
Do you think?
Oh, yeah, you can.
Do you think it would be reasonable to strike the word discussion just in an amendment or something, or just to go back, just to eliminate all doubt about that?
Yeah, I mean, if they have room to like amend it, and if they want
or
to
just repeal the word and replace it, I think you can do something like that.
Yeah, well, yeah, you can always. Yeah, I mean, you could do that, right? So it would be a process, but like, I mean, if that was going to be the sticking point, if I was drafting this bill, if I knew the sticking point was going to be people were going to be like upset about the difference in the word discussion and instruction, just get rid of the word discussion and replace it with instruction. Why create avenues to attack your bill that don't exist? I think that's an oversight, actually. And I would criticize the bill's drafters for doing that.
Sure.
Let's go to Scott.
Yeah, so first I want to attack the idea of like old definition of age appropriate, right? And because like you make a really logical argument, right? Which is that with the old definition of age appropriate, if that was already violated, right, then that means that the bill doesn't actually change anything, right? Unless it defines said thing. The issue with that line of logic is that the assumption is that the enforcement mechanisms were already there, and this bill adds additional enforcement mechanisms, right?
Right.
So one could assume that age appropriate was already being violated, right? And that the way that age appropriate is better determined to come in line with the law of age appropriate is through civil suits from the parents, through bringing in a magistrate if the school doesn't change positions after 30 days, etc. Right? So I think the actual assumption of the bill is that age inappropriate things are being taught in schools. We need to stop that. And the way that we stop that is by opening the avenue to civil lawsuits, as well as having a process by which the school districts are able to clarify if there's an issue and then bring in a magistrate to be a neutral party to fix these things. So I don't think that, like, while I kind of get what you're saying, I think what the bill actually does is put in those mechanisms to make sure that age appropriate things are being done under the assumption that age inappropriate things are being done, not per se under the assumption that there was already enforcement mechanisms to fix this and that the bill is like a Pyrrhic victory. The second thing that I wanted to say is I you know, LSP is gone, but someone else, I can't remember, brought this up. They kept saying chilling effect, right? This will have a chilling effect. And I think it's really important to understand that that's not true, because chilling effect actually is a legal thing, right? It starts with Bagot v. Bullitt, 1964, is kind of the beginning of chilling effect doctrine. There's a lot of other anti-communist Supreme Court cases in the 60s and following that kind of lay down additional foundations of chilling effect doctrine. Now, the reason I bring up Bagot v. Bullitt is because that's the only one that actually deals with state employees. And what this specifically says is that loyalty oaths to certain political ideologies can't be required, or against certain political ideologies can't be required, which makes portions of the Hatch Act of 1946 unconstitutional, right? Which is why Hatch Act violations now are just like government employees like doing Katie Couric or something and talking about their political opinions when they're supposed to remain like a neutral arbiter, right? So when you say that, oh, this is going to have a chilling effect, this isn't towards citizens and their rights to say or have conversations. This is towards teachers that have your children that are representatives of the state government, and whether or not they can teach your children certain ideological things. And this says no. There is no chilling effect doctrine or violation of the First Amendment freedom of speech by saying government employees working on behalf of the government as the state are wards of your children aren't supposed to teach them certain political philosophies or ideologies or certain things about sexual orientation, etc. Like that you just need to stop saying chilling effect, because it's just not true and it's unfounded here.
Let's go. Corey and then Joe.
Yeah, I just have I think a question of clarification for Fnatic that I think might maybe highlight the fundamental disagreement. Fnatic, so based off what you said, so do you think teachers just simply should be allowed to instruct, for example, a third grader that same-sex marriage just exists and is acceptable, just right there? Do you think that?
If you're talking, then we can't hear you.
I think he's thinking.
I thought he was thinking too.
Yeah, I think it's still age inappropriate, and I'll say why. I think when you start talking about like same-sex marriage or not just same-sex marriage, because I mean that I don't know. I guess it feels kind of weird to me because it seems like that's something that wouldn't need to be taught. It seems like there would need to be like classroom instruction on that. Like it seems like that's something that like you could start learning when you learn about sexuality and things like that. Like at the same time. Otherwise, I think that would cause probably I think that could lead to questions about sexuality, which I could say are age inappropriate before like the 5th grade, which is I think the average age when we do sex education. So I would say, no, I think that sounds like something that doesn't.
But just on the point alone of like just informing a child, a third grader, that same-sex marriage exists and is acceptable, like that in a fact, like you would not be. It's more like it seems like the implications of that you have a problem with.
Sure,
Is that,
I
is that
guess
correct?
so. Yeah,
Uh,
well, I mean, I'm always going to base things based off of the implications and what happens downstream from it. I'm not going to just sit here and say I just think it's bad to do it because I just don't like doing it. Like there needs to be some
Yeah.
sort of reasoning or ideology behind why.
I think that's probably the fundamental. Like I think teachers should, at the very least, should be able to just inform a child, a third grader in this example, that same-sex marriage exists, is acceptable, and like the conversation can end there. Or like
But it won't. But it won't. That's
You know
the
what
problem.
else you can say?
Talking to them
Ask your
about, like,
parents.
open marriages, or
There
like,
you go.
What?
how-
Yeah.
Oh,
like, how
I'm sorry,
fluid-
Timmy. I'm sorry, Timmy. Like, you know what? That you should totally talk to mom and dad about that.
And
Like,
and that's where I
and
would
just
say,
be done
like,
with that.
mom and dad, if they're a certain political affiliation, they might have probably, I would say, a very different answer in
Right,
terms
but
of
it's
like
not your job to enforce
Right,
your
and that's
ideology
where the
I think-
fundamental
to the next generation.
that's where the fundamental disagreement is of like
No. I hope we don't have a fundamental disagreement on you having the belief system that teachers can be usurpacious and intentionally teach children things that they know that their parents are not interested in and that they have an investment in doing so. Is that what you're saying? Because if so, then you're a perfect example of why we need this bill. Because it's people like you and teachers who think like you who are intentionally going out of their way to instruct children in ways that are not generally acceptable by whatever the parents are in this region, that are saying that they don't want their children taught this way, and they feel like, hey, we can just do it and we'll hide it from the parents and we'll be the instructors instead of allowing parents the ability to teach it to children when it's age appropriate. Like, it's you can't hide. You're never going to be able to just hide forever from your children that same sex exists, that sexuality exists, that sex exists, or any of those kinds of things. But you can say that some things are age inappropriate. And when you as a person say, I know better than the parents and I'm going to do better, that's why this bill exists. And I think it's perfectly sound. Thank you for
Okay,
proving the point.
Here's why. Okay, I already talked about why I think the bill.
I would want to respond to
Let
that.
him
but I'll
respond,
Michael
please.
go.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah. So to push back on the point, I think you vastly underestimate how bad parents can be, and how the lengths that some parents are willing to go to either misinform the child or neglect giving their child, actually good, hopefully helpful information.
It's not your fucking child, Corey.
It's not your kid. Who cares? So here's the deal.
I don't give a fuck
again,
what your opinion is on how we should educate children better than the fucking parents.
I know you don't.
That's why it's called.
100%.
That's why it's not called. That's why it's not called the "Don't Say Gay" bill. It's called the Parental Rights in Education bill,
Boom.
because it's reaffirming that the state isn't the one, and indoctrinated teachers in whatever fucking philosophy they are, even if they're crazy fucking young Earth creationists.
It's called the
It's not
Don't
the
Groom Kids
teachers.
bill.
It's not the fucking teacher's responsibility to become the parents of children and usurp their
I don't think
guardianship
they're
rights
becoming
over
the
their
parent
children.
just by saying same-sex marriage exists.
Well,
and
it's
that's more or less
maybe you're
just
not
describing
becoming the
reality
parent.
at this point.
You're not becoming the parent, but you're definitely usurping the parent's authority to teach things at the age that they find appropriate. Certain things can be facts, but still age inappropriate, and it's up to parents to decide when these things are age appropriate. Just like when it comes to sex education, you can sign a waiver to not do that, right? And a teacher can't just decide, no, I'm telling you about sex, right? The parent can decide, I want to teach you in the way that I find appropriate and whatever makes the most sense to me, and they have rights to do that. And the state has always respected the parents' rights to do that.
Yeah,
I don't know why you think that the state has the right to do more than that.
Do you think the state
in
has
this
the right
way.
to teach evolution in schools?
The state
Of course they
doesn't.
can.
The state doesn't
Well,
respect parents' rights
that's
to
the
do
point.
that.
Yeah,
that is
the
the
If the
point.
parents decide to support their children with regards to some of these issues, then DeSantis wants to take away those children and say they're abusive. This is happening here in Texas as well. So sometimes.
Wait, what are
it's,
you talking about? What do you mean? What do you mean by
what do you-
support the parents?
So let's say, for instance, right here in Texas, and DeSantis is advocating for the same policy as Texas. We've developed our governor developed a policy that said that if you have a child who's under 18 and they want to get hormone blockers, or they want to get CRT even as late as at age 17, if the parents support that, the state can take those children away.
That's totally reasonable.
I think that makes all the sense in the world
I'm
when you compare that with all of the studies that show some of the negative long-term effects of puberty blockers. When you
I'm not
find out that
arguing
the
that
vast
point.
majority of children who claim to be trans end
I'm
up
not
not being
arguing that
trans by the
point.
time they're adults, all of these things make
That's
sense.
not
Well, if
true.
you're not arguing that
I'm
point,
not.
but
No, a
if
point
you're
I'm
making
arguing
that
is that you
statement,
said Hold
No,
on.
but if you're making that statement and you're not putting that statement in context to understand why that would be appropriate, just like it would
I can give
probably
you the
line up
context
in
now.
virtue with the same thing that we're talking
I
about
can
as
give
far
you
as
the
parents
context
making
now.
appropriate
Okay, whoa,
decisions
whoa, whoa.
and the state of
Let him
protecting
give
that.
him that context.
I can
do
give you
wanna
the
get to Joe
context now. The
Lewis.
context is you said that the state is saying the parents get to make that decision, but no, really, the state is saying we get
These
to
are
make
different
that decision
decisions.
sometimes.
No, these are
Yeah,
different decisions.
Sure, that's what I'm pointing out. And the second thing I'm pointing out is that
What does
the
that
left,
statement mean?
it means this: the left looks at parents who won't support their children in those cases and says they're being abusive to their children. The right looks at parents that do support their children in those cases and says they're being abusive. And in both cases, they're saying because of abuse, the parents shouldn't get to decide. And what I'm saying is the left and right are using similar logic trees in order to get at opposing points
No,
of
they're
view.
not.
No, they're not
Just
using
for-
similar
no,
logic
listen,
trees
listen,
because
listen,
that's
listen.
when you end on that conclusion is exactly where the problem is. Why I went into all the detail about the fact that we're not using the same logic trees, because if the left was using a logic tree that we can look and study and say that the vast majority of children who say that they're trans actually are trans by the time they're adults, then you would be able to say, well, this is why it makes the most sense to do this. But unfortunately, we have data that says the complete opposite, that the vast majority of children who claim to be trans by the time they're adults are no longer claiming to be trans, right? So then that's already a reason why you should be making such long-term decisions for children at the age of 8 that don't know any better.
Well,
That's one of the
long-term
reasons.
decisions are
Secondly,
being made either way.
secondly,
Wow.
we have all of the data that clearly demonstrates the fact that in that there are long-term effects for even things like puberty blockers, which is why you have countries like Sweden, one of the most progressive countries that we know of, that decides, you know what, after doing this and after seeing some of the long-term harms and stuff, we got to dial this stuff back. So we're using a tree of, we have data, we have evidence that this is harmful. The left is using the just, it feels good, and so
Ideology.
therefore it must be better. That's what the freak. They're not the same logical trees.
The logical tree.
I got it.
Fanatics.
I gotta
wrong
get
here,
to Joe
philosophically.
Lewis. We've been waiting. Joe Lewis.
All right. Well, you okay?
So
Who's waiting? Oh,
I'm
Joe. Okay.
so I support this bill, but I have problems with this bill. The problems I have specifically are with Articles 2, 3, and 6. And there's like just things that I think contextually could help a lot of people. So I'm gonna try my best with the time I have to shed a little bit of light. In terms of Article 3, if Florida adopted sexuality educational standards, they wouldn't have to have Article 3 as it exists in the bill. So what you're seeing is the legislature reacting to something that they could easily just remedy by adopting sexual education standards. Because you learn about the two things that they describe, sexual orientation and gender identity, by the end of 5th grade. And then that leads into a kickoff to other curriculum. So because they don't have that, they have to etch it out from K through 3. But in sexual education standards, it doesn't exist in K through 3 already. So they could easily just adopt those standards. And that solves my qualm with Article 3. Article 6, in terms about the administration of questionnaires, this is something that already happens in school districts, which would lead me to suggest that it doesn't exist in Florida. So there's something that's existing at districts levels wide enough, possibly, that would make them feel like they need to put that in there. They could easily just do something with the Department of Education to say, like, if you're administering questionnaires at certain levels, you can, about like the well-being and student well-being, then you can just like do it through that route. So you don't need legislature to do that. So that's like my issue with Article 6. Article 2 is a little complicated because on one hand, you can say that it's just like just a TLDR. It's just a conflict of FERPA. Like right now, under directory information, gender is included as directory information under FERPA. But it seems like that the definition of gender as it relates to FERPA and directory information could potentially open the door that if that information from the student becomes public or disclosed, it could potentially have harm. But that's why in Article 2, they try to cover their ass. I think it's in Article 2, where the language is something along the lines of the district can prohibit it or encourage to restrict it if they believe that there is a result that like it would lead to like neglect and abuse and something like that. So I understand the gender argument though, where if you have a child who identifies as something that's different from their gender that's within the directory information, and you want to change that, it's possible that the parents could just supersede that, and it's just like a whole just like small little legal mess. So I understand why Article 2 is worded as the way it is. Personally, I think this is more like, on one hand, it's Florida not adopting sexual education standards that would solve my problems with 3 and 6, and then with 2, it's just updating FERPA. But unfortunately, the desire to update FERPA is not very popular right now, mainly because they're like, most people don't feel like it's a burden that's high enough in gender to bring up the argument. I would say I think it's totally, I encourage the revision of FERPA because I think that would solve a lot of problems. And then this bill could be like a bit more targeted was trying to solve. But I guess the short of it, I think Florida needs to adopt sexual education standards. So then a whole portion of this bill and language of this bill would already be covered under there. And then you can make adjustments from the Department of Education. You don't need the legislature for that. And 2, I think Floridians, Texans, and anybody who has like problems with gender, really the arguments with FERPA in terms of like directory information.
Wait, but just so we're clear, when you say you have a problem with number 6, Article 6, is this the part that just says before administering a student well-being questionnaire or health screening form to a student in kindergarten through grade 3, the school district must provide the questionnaire or health screening form to the parent and obtain the permission of the parent? Is that the one you're talking about?
Did you say 2 or 6?
I'm reading number 6.
Oh, the problem I have with 6 is that this already exists within sexual education standards. So within sexual education standards and well-being standards, the language of Article 6 already exists. And the argument that I'm saying is that they could just adopt the sexual education standards under the NSES, and then you don't have to worry about that part of the bill at all. You don't need legislature to do that.
But I got you. But since they don't have that, then it seems like this bill is actually doing something that exists in most places under sexual education standards that sounds like very reasonable, right? Like you don't have a problem with the merit of this thing itself. It's an incredibly like reasonable standard, right?
The problem that I have is that I don't agree. Like I think that Republicans are pretty stupid. So I think that if they took a couple minutes of like taking certain avenues that were outside of the legislature, they wouldn't have to worry about creating legislation like this and having to deal with a legal battle. Because DeSantis
totally understood that, but the question I was asking was, is this specific instruction though? It seems like the standard that they're doing, that they're finding a workaround to get to, that it's not doing.
I'm okay. Yeah, I'm okay.
Reasonable thing to do.
I'm okay with the language because the language already exists in terms of sex ed standards. But the problem I have is that you have the state government basically speaking on behalf of the schools when.
That always happens.
Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, yes, this already exists, but I'm saying they don't have to make they don't have to vote on these things. Like DeSantis could do this with collaboration with the Department of Education and bypass the legislature altogether. So I don't know why they're doing it this way.
Sure.
The only thing
just to be clear, so that article makes sense, right? That number 6 makes sense in the sense since it doesn't exist at the state level, for them to have it, the statutes of it and what it represents is a good thing. And then likewise, we would say the same thing about number 3, right? Like again, that's also another one. That's like
again, my qualms with it, the language of it is totally fine, and this is stuff that already exists. The problem I have
is the language and the statutes.
The problem I have is the legislature doing this. That's the issue I take with.
So one of the benefits of the legislature doing it though is that let's say DeSantis loses in a governor election, and the next governor is a Democrat. You know, if it's not legislation, the next governor could simply direct, it to no longer be the case that this particular standard is enforced. Now that it's legislation, you actually need to like go through the repeal process, which is a much more difficult process.
And I'd say that fear is baseless because Democrats already adopt sexual education standards in states. So you'd have to find a Democrat who would be against adopting the sexuality standards. And if you can find that Democrat, then maybe I'd do that. But that argument is mute because Democrats support sexual education standards, and Article 3 and 6 have that language within sexual education standards.
Yeah, well, I mean, like there's a lot of things that
so we'll
Republicans would look at.
Doobie.
There's a lot of things that like adopting that might sneak in, and that might be like why the Republicans aren't doing it, right?
Such as
So like let's see, in grades 11 through 12, right? Like I don't know much about this, and maybe you can like clarify here, right? But I'm looking at health smart alignment with national sex education standards from
and
Health
the
Smart. I don't-
NSES, yes.
Is
The
that
NSES.
yeah? So
So what's
NSES,
your
national. So
national
like, I'm just
sexuality
curious.
education standards? Yeah, what's up?
I'm just curious, like I don't know, like I'm just hearing about this. I'm not an educator or anything, but like I'm just like, oh, let me look. And like right off the bat, like I can see like sh.12.inf.5 analyze ways systemic oppression and intersectionality impact the sexual agency of communities of color and other marginalized communities. Like
Systemic oppression doesn't appear in the national sexuality
right,
education
like I'm
standards.
saying, like and maybe it doesn't, right? Like I'm literally saying I'm just trying to look this up now, and like I was like, yo, what is this? But what I'm saying is you have a large curriculum, and it wouldn't
Okay.
surprise me, even if that's not the issue, that there are other things that the Republicans don't want to adopt.
I mean,
I'm not a fucking, like, I didn't expect to go into this. I can admit.
yeah, I mean, I'm just saying,
I'm just
right,
saying,
but
you're saying I can't see any way. And I'm like, I can imagine, like, if we go through it, there's probably a reason that they haven't adopted it, right? I mean, is it like, I think the reasoning that Republicans are just stupid and that's why they haven't adopted a larger framework might not be true. There might be other things in that framework that they disagree with, and that's why they haven't adopted it, right?
well, but that's why they can adopt it and make adjustments based on certain parts of it. So just because it exists within the
Or they could
standards, they can
legislate
make
certain things that they wanted, right? Like, which is what they did.
nope.
I don't see the distinction here. I don't understand why it's a problem.
I'm saying that the things that exist in the bill currently can
Mhm.
be remedied by adopting the national sexuality education standards. Then the
Right.
thing is, what Republicans can do is if they have certain problems within those standards, they can just make adjustments for that. And you don't have to worry about getting the votes and passing it legislatively. So
No.
everything that you're saying and the things that you're worrying about,
I
they
mean,
can just
that's
carve
fair.
out within the standards.
That's fair, but also it presents a certain danger, right? Electorally, right? Where certain, because I mean, these people have to get elected, right? And so once that big compromise kicks in, and then they have this giant thing, and then they're like trying to figure out what should stay and what shouldn't stay, that might make that you might lose some votes on that, or you might lose
How?
some.
The Republicans can totally lose votes in Florida. Like, are we trying to act like that's not a reality, or are you saying like
No,
it's
I'm
large
not
enough
saying
where
that.
they
What
should
I'm
be
saying
afraid
is
to lose votes?
adopting a larger framework and then debating all of the different pieces to include and not include could put people at more of a risk than, let's say, something that is widely popular in Florida, which was the parental rights and education bill. It might have just been a safer bet for them politically.
It's
So-
probably just a lazier thing to
Okay,
do.
I
but-
want to
I
get
mean,
back
maybe,
to,
but I
like,
just don't see it as being a
it's
problem.
like,
in here.
rather
Why would it be lazier if it takes more effort?
rather than like arguing about the mechanism as to why we got this passed, I want to argue about like the content of the bill. Let's get to Doobie. Hey, Michael.
I just want to clarify. So, Joe, you agree then that
I agree
children
with
should be-
Article 3, 6, and 2. Yes.
Wait, be very clear about what that. What
I
that is,
agree with
though,
Article
for-
3, 6, and 2.
No, but okay, but
within
like
that.
you're doing the thing, right? So, like, do you think that children shouldn't be taught about sexuality or gender identity in the classroom from kindergarten through third grade?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I wanted you to say. Like, I don't know why you need to go into fucking nerd mode. So I think
I
it's
said I agree
Corey-
with it, but you're looking for holes.
Corey and Sprout.
Yo,
the only
that's
ones on here now
not
that-
fucking fair that you're going against Joe for going in nerd mode. While
Fucking
you
nerd
engaged
mode,
with
okay?
me, fucking my philosophy of libertarianism and shit.
That's
All right, put some
entertaining.
respect
nerd
on his
mode.
name.
No, that's
All
I love Joe. Okay, I disagree with him about everything, but I love him.
That's not
Yeah,
true.
me
but
too.
So Sprout.
okay.
So Sprout.
On principle.
Why
just disagree.
why do you disagree with the bill, Sprout?
I disagree. with the
Aside from
bill.
it being vague or whatever, like, why do you disagree with it?
I disagree with the bill because I believe it's unconstitutionally vague, and that's my qualm
That's
with
it?
the bill. So that's my qualm with the bill. I think that if you're going to have a law, that it needs to be understood by someone with common intelligence. The common individual should be able to
Okay, but
understand
if it were
should be able to
specific.
understand this law and be able
So
to
if it were
realize whether or not they're
specific
breaking it or
in
not.
saying that, so if it were specific in getting to the goal of stopping this discussion in the classrooms, right? Gender identity, sexuality, etc. you'd be fine with it.
If they specified what they meant by age appropriate during these certain different years, I would have to look at it and then tell you if I'm okay with it or not. I'm okay with the first half. The second
You're okay with the
half,
spirit of the bill.
I'm okay with the spirit of the bill. The second half, I would have to look at the specifics before I'd sign on it. I would want to see what they deem as age appropriate for each age before I'd be able to sign off on it.
Okay, so you're
There's no
only
need to
against it because
revisit
it's
all
not like
those. Yeah.
yeah, because you're just because of the vague thing, but you have no issue with the spirit.
Yeah, we
so
kinda
who here has
already
an
went
issue with like the
over all
spirit of
that.
the bill then?
Oh,
I
me.
think I'm pretty much the only one.
Yeah.
I guess Prime. Yeah, Prime as well.
Well, I mean, PrimeCayes and friends are obviously, and we know who his one friend is in
Oh,
this panel.
Okay, well, I
Well, I
guess
think
so.
like the go for it.
Can you kind of lay out like why you have an issue with the spirit of the bill?
The spirit of the bill, I have more of a problem with the spirit of the bill than I do with the letter of the bill because,
Sure.
like I said, I don't think it's really going to have much of an effect for the same reason those other two laws that I mentioned never had an effect on the teaching profession, even though we all thought that they would. But I think the spirit of the bill is to make it look like they're doing something and to make it look like they're standing up to something. But I don't think it's designed to change the law at all. I think just as Fanatic said earlier, what was age appropriate before is what's age appropriate now. He just thinks that enforcement wasn't up to snuff and that this bill increases enforcement or something like that, but it doesn't actually change the rules or the law at all. And to that extent, its only design is rhetorical. And I just don't like bills that are only designed to be rhetorical.
So you don't agree that there is like a certain section, subsection of the educational, the educator populace, whatever the fuck you want to call it, that is intentionally pushing an ideology of like gender dissolution, right? Of pushing like transness and non-binariness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, onto young children. You don't agree that that's happening?
I think if that's happening at the K through 3 level, those teachers should have been fired before this bill, and they should be fired after this bill. And I don't think the bill was necessary for that to happen.
Okay, but what about the thing that I was talking about where it was a second grader, where they were literally going through a situation in which the kid decided that he was trans, and they decided and the school had like policy that basically said you can't tell the parents that the kid is trans, but you're required to refer to the kid as trans.
Yeah, that's Article 2. It covers that. That's the problem.
Absolutely. So wait, so that's
no,
not
but wait for that real quick. But what I'm trying to say is that like the issue at play here is a FERPA thing. It's not really a bill thing.
Like, what do you mean?
So if I have a student that identifies something outside of their gender, and we can reasonably believe that that information does not need to be disclosed to the parent due to reasons of abuse, neglect, potential of like poor adversity at the home, you can withhold that information from the parent.
Oh, sure, but that was
that's in the bill too.
Hold on. Of course, that is in the bill, and I think that's a great thing. Obviously, if you have a reasonable expectation,
right, that's under FERPA already, though.
Of course, exactly. But the problem was that there was no bill that actually mandated that people do this before. There was no bill. There was nothing. No. There was nothing that required that you had to inform parents otherwise.
What do you mean?
Right? Like you're looking at the negatory. You're looking at the negatory that basically says if you think there's abuse, then you can withhold. But there was nothing that said, but you must disclose otherwise prior to this.
Can you give me an example? I'm not understanding your language.
So there were situations in which there was a child who was trans. And and the child who was trans was the school was like, okay, good, we're going to affirm his gender. We're going to refer to this kid as trans, but we're not going to tell his parents. There was no law that said they had to tell the parents, was there?
If that information, if disclosed, could potentially cause harm to the child, you can withhold that under FERPA.
Okay, right. So hold on. So you're saying this is the law that allows you to withhold it. Was there any law mandating that they communicated it?
What do you mean by mandating that they had to communicate that change exists?
Yes. No. That they had to communicate to the parents otherwise. You keep saying, given A being if the parent, if it's known that there will be abuse as a result of this. And if A, then B, you can withhold the information. Was there any law that said if not A, then you must communicate?
So just in the practical, what you're saying is that if I knew that the child identified under a different gender identity, whatever that may be, and then the parent keeps affirming the opposite, then I can affirm the opposite that they're saying, knowing that
No,
they believe
Joe.
something else.
No.
Let me give you an
No.
example. Let me give you an example. So there is a case, right, known as the daughter's known as January is her first name, Little John second name. Silly ass fucking name, I get it. But regardless, now the mom, right, and the parents were not informed that the previous to this bill, they were not informed that the school had socially transitioned her, that there was official documents about what bathroom she could go into, and she was and the daughter was also going to the guidance counselor and being socially transitioned by the school itself, and the guidance counselor was providing therapy. All of this was kept secret from the mother, and this occurred for over for an entire school year, where
Yep.
she was at home, she was a daughter, and at school she was a boy. Right now, the mom herself did not agree to this. In
That's
fact,
allowed
the mom
under
herself,
FERPA.
right? But the bill, right? There was
Mhm.
no reasonable suspicion in any way, shape, or form that abuse would occur. In fact, the mom was a licensed counselor and was not aware that her daughter had been socially transitioned into a boy, and the school kept it a secret from her. This is
Right.
the issue that is like upsetting things, and this is why the bill was needed, because it's not a matter of the school having the capacity to say, oh, it might be a bad thing. It was the school's policy in Tallahassee, Florida, that they have to keep it secret from the parents, and that only the child may disclose this information to the parents. So it was a
Yes.
policy that they would intentionally hide information from the parents, which like causes all kinds of issues, because now you have a parent affirming one gender, a school system affirming another gender,
Mhm.
and they didn't have any means to be able to get them to see their own therapist, and they didn't have any means to be able to have that discussion with their child or see what's going on. She didn't find out until like her daughter basically came out to her as a boy, and then eventually with therapy detransitioned.
Okay, so
I don't understand why you're trying to paint this story as something that happens in school that doesn't already happen in school districts all over America, where school districts determine through information that the child gives them that this information was disclosed to the parent, it could potentially cause harm. But
Okay.
it seems from the language.
Wait,
there
I
Let me
don't
try
think
one last
that
time. Let me try one
justification-
last time. Can I try one last time?
But the thing that you're trying, but the thing that you're,
Well, okay.
if I'm
hold on.
understanding
Benny
what
the-
you,
hold on. Thank you, Benny the V-Man, for your kind donation previously. Right, much appreciated. Says they really appreciate our kind of discussions, and so shout out to you. Gotta make sure you appreciate it. So I don't. We're getting bogged down on this specific point.
No, it's really important. Can I try one last thing?
One
no,
last
no,
time,
the
because-
thing I'm trying to
You're
connect the
not
dots
understanding,
here.
Joe. I promise you, you're not
I
understanding.
didn't even finish my fucking thought because you guys keep
Okay.
fucking doing this fucking right-wing bullshit. I'm agreeing with you, but I'm trying to lay out what the problem that currently exists, and you guys are being fucking retarded. So, like, the thing that's happening
No,
here,
you're just not getting it.
It's
but
okay.
I was
Let him
about
try.
to-
Let him
I was
try.
about to finish. I was about to finish the entire point, and then you guys started talking. I'd really like to finish this. So, what it seems like you're trying to tell me is that the school district, in this case, Leon County Schools, were not able to substantiate the argument of harm. Is that what your holdup is?
It's
That
no.
they
They
did
never
all
attempted
these-
No,
to.
no, 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 no,
they
no, no,
did-
no.
they did
Here,
all
let me
these
respond. Let me
things.
respond. Let me
They did-
respond.
okay,
Let me
sure.
respond, please.
Sure.
No, I'm not trying to communicate that. What I'm saying is that the general principle, there was no law saying in such cases, not in just in that individual case. I'm saying that yes, you're providing a general law, a general rule, a general understanding that if you have reasonable view of harm, then you can withhold. But what I'm saying is that parents want there to be. If there is no general view of harm, of potential harm, then you should be required to disclose. Do you understand the difference between those two things?
And that would be a FERPA thing then.
Wait, is that in FERPA?
In FERPA, that doesn't exist. So
That-
you would
right,
have
so
to.
right.
So you would have to revise FERPA in a
God.
way. If I'm trying to understand what you're saying here, I'm going to take it at face value. I don't know the story, but I'm going to interpret that you guys are approaching this and representing this honestly. Is
Sure.
that you would need to have within FERPA a revision of directory information that involves some type of investigatory process around the potential for harm and
Okay.
and the forcing of disclosure if harm
Yes.
isn't
Fucking
proven.
dare
So
you.
let's. Thank
The
you. No, we're
state
there.
is
We're
gonna-
there.
no,
Wait. We're
no,
there.
the
We're there. No.
state
We
is
got
gonna
it. We got it. We got it. We got it. Hold on.
investigate-
Help me.
1 second. 1
No.
second. No, we're
Fuck
there.
you
I got you.
monster.
Sure. You're right. I'm a monster. Joe. So
No,
that's
not
exactly.
you, fucking Joe.
Okay, I
Saying
got
the
you. It's
fuck- he
fine.
wants the
It's
state
so,
to fucking
okay.
No,
investigate
no, it's
parents
fine.
to
It's
determine
fine,
whether or not
Joe.
harm
So
might
my
occur.
point being that we needed the statute, right? Since I was the one that initially brought this up. The point is, you're right. This is akin to the other arguments you had about Articles 2, 3, and 6, where you're saying there's a larger body or something that needs to happen in this way. Florida, for obvious reasons, is resistant to such overarching things. So what they're doing now is going through the legislature in order to design these things. And so you do understand now the concerns of the parents and the concerns of the legislature, such that they created this law without going to some broader body or whatever in order to try to reform that thing. They said, screw that. We're not going through you. We'll go through this justice legislature to ensure that this thing happens. I think that's what's happening there. And so you would agree, though, in the absence, do you agree in the absence of the presence of some sort of reasonable harm that that districts or schools or administrators or teachers, whoever the freak, they should be required to inform parents of these sorts of things?
Only in a situation where you could determine that there is if you can reasonably determine that no harm could be.
That's what I just said, in absence. That's what I just said, in
Right.
absence.
Right,
You
which
can
would
rule
involve.
out potential for abuse.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
if you can rule out a potential for abuse, then the district can be inclined to disclose that information.
Okay,
You don't
that's
assume-
and that's
no,
what this
can
bill
be
does, and that's why this
inclined
bill is
to.
great. Thank
No,
you.
you don't assume abuse.
Well, he
You
said
only
inclined.
withhold him. No, he said if they can rule it out. No,
Yeah.
you do not assume that parents do not
Oh,
have
sure.
the right to information of their children. You
We
assume that
already-
they have a right to that
Wait,
information.
according
That is
to
not what the
wait,
policy was
no,
before.
wait, according to
Whoa.
according
The
to a
policy
local,
was before was an assumption that a parents would
Hear me?
that
According
this
to a-
information would
Okay.
be potentially dangerous. So withhold it. After the bill, the assumption is parents have a right to know unless there is reasons given that they might
Sure.
be abusive.
according
100%.
to according
That's-
to a
that's
local
super
according
important
to okay
That is very,
according
very
to
good
a local
distinction.
news organization, the parents emailed the school emailed in this exact case, because I've had enough
What
time
the
you guys to
fuck?
talk about it. In this exact case, the parents emailed the school and told
Did
the
you-
school that she
did you
was
go silent?
this individual was
I've never
identifying
heard people being silent in chat.
was
before.
All right, hon.
Yo,
you guys.
I can hear Sprouticus
Yeah,
in
yeah, you
another
guys can't hear
speaker.
my bad. Sorry, I was
Yeah.
muted. That's my bad.
Oh,
You sick fuck.
Oh, wait,
So-
but now mute and whereby.
yeah. Hold on.
Oh,
You-
No,
shit.
I'm literally hearing
There we
Sprout.
go.
There you
and
go.
Only Sprout
Okay.
come
Yeah,
from.
Sprout wasn't
go.
aware.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
So, all right.
There we
So with this being said, the school had emailed. Sorry, the parent had emailed the school about their child being non-binary, and suggesting that the kid wants to go by a different name, etc. and so on. The lawsuit all pins around where was it? Sorry. The parent claims that when she asked the school for more information, the school denied her access to meetings and information and tried to conceal information regarding her child. So when the parent specifically asked for information, the school declined to give information. That is what the lawsuit is around. The parents already emailed prior to the school, prior to this, that the child was non-binary and wanted to go by this nickname.
Oh, that makes it so much more complicated. Oh my god.
Which case is this? Are you saying this is Sarah? You saying this is January Littlejohn?
Yeah, January Littlejohn.
This must have occurred after
according
this.
to a local news source.
This
What's
must
the-
have
what's
occurred
the source
afterwards.
that
'Cause she
you-
did like a TED talk like a
WRAL.
year ago or something.
WRAL.
Okay.
So this must be like the continuation of the issues after she found out.
Well, that's
Yeah,
what the
is this
lawsuit's
some- is this
pending
some,
on. He's
like-
talking about the lawsuit. The lawsuit's pending on that.
I was talking
School
about the
declining
original
to give
story
information.
from like a
Okay.
year and a half ago, but like that makes it even worse, I think.
Absolutely, it
I
does. And
hadn't
so,
heard that
so that's what we're talking about. This is why this bill is so amazing. Once again, the idea that a school would intentionally withhold such vital information that could impact a person's life, and we're starting to see a suicide rate of around 41%. When you start talking about doing things that could long-term damage a child and sending a child mixed signals because you're intentionally withholding the sorts of information that is absolutely vital for the freaking child's stability and well-being, and you're withholding it from the parents, the legal guardians, the people who are going going to be dealing with this for the rest of their lives, it seems like a problem. I understand the idea. These things have always existed, where it's like if there's reason for harm, you can go and find through other routes. You can support them. You can do things to child protective services or other things like that. All of that makes sense. But what I'm saying is, in absence of that, you should be required to inform a parent. And it seems like this law is amazing for actually forcing you to do so.
Yeah, if I may ask, and I think this again, this question might be a fundamental difference of like so Fanatic, sort of to my point in terms of parenting, what does it say? It seems like you are very much in favor of, you know, pretty much absolute parental rights, more or less. So what does it say about the parents if a child is sharing something to the teacher that they are not sharing with the parents?
It could say a bunch of it could say a bunch of things. Hell, it could. I mean, there's plenty of times where like children just might be more like apt to teaching in a specific. I mean, just sharing things in a given social environment. It could be spur of the moment. Maybe another kid can come out, and another one can. You know, we already know about rapid onset of gender dysphoria, right? So like, it could be just that this is the environment where this kind of thing is happening, and so a child is willing to say it to a parent, and because like it's something that's brand new, and this is the environment where they're discovering this sort of thing happening, and not ever having and just having not explained it to the parent yet. I don't know. There's a billion different reasons why that can happen. I just don't know why we would automatically assume that a child's going to be abusive. I don't think there's any reason to assume that. And even if, I don't have to go any further. That's it.
Yeah, if I may say so. And sort of my follow-up question, and again, this is also directed to Fanatic and Scott. This might be the fundamental disagreement. Like, so Fanatic, do you think parents have the right to like hit their children?
What? Do they have the right to hit them?
Yes.
No, probably not. Like, no, legally, I don't think you do.
It's legal, but yeah.
Oh, is it?
Well, exactly. And so, Scott, do you think parents have the right to hit their children?
I think that parents have the right to have the default guardianship over their children, and this includes corporal punishment, though I'm morally against it, so long as permanent harm and damage is not being done. So scarring a child, beating a child so badly that it causes like some permanent damage to their body is something that should be illegal. But you know, smacking your kid because he's about to touch the oven that's hot is obviously something that's not.
I guess so.
Right. So it just depends on. Right. Well,
I
mean, like, I think you have a right, even though I morally, personally disagree with, let's say, spanking your kids hard, right? If there's no permanent damage done, then I don't think there's any philosophical way that you can prove that you have done like some harm to the child other than like these longitudinal studies that have issues. I do agree that the science tends to point that it's worse to hit your kids than to not hit your kids, right? But I think the argument is obviously the same for GRNH, antigen therapy, and hormone replacement therapy, right? Is that you do permanent physical harm to the child while they're unable to consent, right? So the same logic that I would say that you can't like beat a child so bad that it scars them is also the same reason it is a criminal act to give your child puberty blockers or to give your child hormone replacement therapy, because they're not adults, they can't consent, and you forestalled your guardianship. You have abandoned and neglected your child, and someone else needs to come and take them.
Corey, can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, are you digging to the idea that the way that we observe corporal punishment, although within all of the statutes talks about verbal abuse, but it's possible that people are missing that when they're talking about corporal punishment?
So Scott brought up like, as long as corporal punishment doesn't do, from what I understand, doesn't do any permanent damage, and it seems like that only extends mostly physical, and then I think they're sort of neglecting the deep, lifelong lasting, psychological damage that results from corporal punishment or hitting a child that doesn't have to like result in scarring or bruising.
No,
yeah, but that's way more nebulous and way harder to prove.
But
though.
you have to prove it.
Yeah, those are totally different.
Like
statements.
if a grandma or grandpa, right, wants to take up a lawsuit and say that they prove that this person has been psychologically harmful and done permanent psychological damage, if they can prove that in court, then yeah, you should pull them away, right? But like
Mhm.
that's a much more nebulous and difficult thing to prove,
This is the most.
and you can't do that off of generalities and bad
I don't know,
science
this
around
is the
trans
most- this-
kids.
Well, no,
And
I mean, you can.
This is one of the most dangerous things, though, is that when you're like, oh, the kid has to prove that he's being psychologically abused. The kid has to prove that he's being verbally abused. The kid has to prove that he's being emotionally abused. These things are extremely hard to prove. Extremely difficult.
Yes, and
so
that's
we are
why.
just leaving kids in these situations to be abused, to end up with scars for life, to end up with PTSD, which does come from emotional, verbal, and psychological abuse. You still get PTSD.
What's the
from those
alternative?
things.
Yeah, I was
What's
going
the
to say, Smartacus. There's no other
The al-
alternative. It actually
The
makes
alternative
all the
is
sense in the world
foster
because
care.
yes, or no,
Foster
not
care
just
is
foster
way
care.
fucking worse.
The alternative would then to be arresting children from their parents with no evidence that they're actually doing anything harmful, and like putting them through absolutely abjectly harmful systems. The amount of people from the foster care system that make up the prison population, the amount of them that are drug users, the amount of them that endure sexual assault and sexual violence. All of these things are problems that come from taking children from their parents. We have all of the data. You can stop saying how about. I'll finish talking, and then you'll be able to respond. So you weren't even. So you were done talking already.
Asked a question and you
You were done talking at that point that you were talking about. At the point that I started talking. Yes, you were. I'm going to go ahead and finish. So anyway, all right, fine. I'll just not talk to you anymore. So anyway, so the point that I was making is for everybody else that has a brain besides Smartacus. So when you look at it and you think about, I got you. I will. So when I'm done talking, and then you can talk. So when you start looking at some of the long-term effects of like all of obviously these other systems, then you can obviously see that like the best person for children is typically their parents. So anytime you're going to be doing something that could result in some sort of harm and taking away a person's right, you need to have proof. It's the same way that we have within our criminal justice system when it comes to whether or not a person is found guilty. So if we can't prove that a person is guilty, then that means that they're going to have rapists on the street and criminals go free. Absolutely. For sure, because unless you can prove it, otherwise you'll be harming innocent people, taking people who haven't harmed their kids, taking their kids away from them, which would obviously damage society. So we wouldn't want to live in a world like that, except for people like idiots like Smartacus.
Wait, Fanatic, but I think you would.
Let's got to be respond.
Yeah, please let him respond.
I love it when people. I love it when people are like this. So Fanatic gets so mad when he gets interrupted, but he's willing to interrupt anybody else. There was a question directed towards me. Now I'm going to answer that question after we got to listen to Fanatic fill our bust. So with that being said, when you're talking about a kid that is being psychologically, emotionally, verbally abused, you have to take the kid at his word. If the kid is reporting, the kid genuinely believes, which most counselors worth their weight in salt can tell if a kid genuinely believes something. If the kid genuinely believes that they're being abused, then they need to be removed from the household, and there needs to be an investigation as to what's going on. If the kid believes this, you need to take the kid at his word, because it is our job as society to protect kids, not leave them in an abusive household.
So
Gotcha. So anytime a 7-year-old testifies that or something, could be literally just mimicking something that they saw on television or mimicking something that their friend said that's not actually applying to their parent. If any of these things happen, for obviously we've seen plenty of times where freaking counselors have coerced children into saying these things, but just the fact, if a child ever testifies, immediately take the kid from his parents. Lord have mercy. Your
wait, Fanatic, wait.
whole functioning brain is so insane. You're such an idiot.
Fanatic. I think.
Real quick. In the 1990s, we had this thing, right? And we realized that it was mostly because women started to like en masse join the workforce, and a lot of children were going to daycares. It was called the Satanic Panic. And throughout the country, there were thousands of investigations of like evil satanic rituals occurring at daycare facilities, and none of them were true because of taking children's word and then interviewing them and then accidentally feeding them information and things of that nature. Daycare people were arrested. People were like trying to find secret satanic rituals in basements that never fucking existed. People actually went to prison after they were convinced that they themselves had done it, and they never fucking did it. The presumption is one of innocence. You presume innocence and then you investigate. You do not take children away from their parents under an assumption of guilt.
I'm going to go to Joe. I'm going to go Aiko and then Lactoid. But I just want to say quickly that Scott, I agree about the moral panic. I disagree where it started. It didn't start with like the kids saying that they were being abused. It started with
Those moms.
parents freaking out.
Yeah.
Parents freaking out, and then
fully mentally functional adults would usually start it.
exactly, and then
Yes.
telling their kids that
not
they've been
children that are
abused.
so much more susceptible.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I'm not sure if you're are you being sarcastic. I didn't catch that part. But like, yeah.
No, I'm
it's
saying
like
it's worse. It proves that it was even easier for
Okay.
a moral panic
Okay,
to
yeah,
occur
for sure.
because
Fair
it was the
enough.
parents that were
It was the
that
parents
way,
that
not just
started
So
it.
you're saying
I just wanted to make that clear.
The kids?
Joe, then
No,
I
it's
go
It's
and
been
then-
fears of
proven.
women.
Yes.
Yeah.
and Corey. But we gotta
Man, I
move. We
can't.
gotta move.
Yeah. Fanatic's making me say gamer worse tonight. Damn. Like this is what being on the opposition of arguments is like with this motherfucker. All right, we gotta talk after this, Fanatics. I gotta pick your brain on some shit. But one thing that I kind of want to push on is because I think we might agree on this is that one thing that we're seeing like with guidance departments, right, is that like guidance departments, generally speaking, I'm gonna be very, very loose when I say generally, is that they're not really like adopting how children and young adults behave and interact with each other. So there are situations where a child might misinterpret a situation and a guidance counselor might believe it to be an abusive situation, which has happened before. It happened to my own family. So like I understand the concern there. However, but I do see that when you do have like properly funded guidance departments and properly staffed professionals, intervention programs, that there are situations where parents do commit different levels of corporal punishment to their child, and then that manifests in their classwork. And then unfortunately, because some parents are really good at hiding these things, that they're able to like, even within certain intervention programs, the parent might come away scot-free. But I think we probably agree with that. Like, we don't want to have a situation where like schools aren't intervening at some capacity. But I
Yeah,
guess
if
like
you can
we're
prove
disagreeing
harm,
on
like,
like
intervene.
what extent.
Well, yeah,
If you
because
can
I
prove
think
harm, intervene. Don't
yes,
just
for
like,
sure. But I think there's two
steal the
different
kids in
statements.
an attempt to prove harm.
Right, that's what I was gonna say. There's two different statements. Yes, I
Sure.
totally agree with you that we don't want schools not to intervene in the case where they're suspicious of something, but we also want to make sure that we're not at a state where children are being taken away from parents who aren't actually abusing them. That's the
Sure.
other problem that we don't want.
Yeah, and then the question, and then like the like the burden that schools have to do is like understand that like family dynamics are unique. Some things that we might deem acceptable in one family, we might not deem acceptable in another, and that might not necessarily mean that's bad parenting. I'm not saying hit your fucking kids, but it's like there are certain like things that like because I've seen it happen where a guidance counselor might interpret it as an abuse or interpret it as something that's deeper than it actually is, and then you get these like adverse results. But I don't think like districts and schools wholesale get to like get out of the game in terms of that.
Let's
Sure,
go.
but
To
again, like,
like to wait, Corey. We gotta move because we're
Yeah,
already over.
Mine's gonna be really fast. I'm just curious because it's something because of some of the interactions I've heard with Corey. I just wanted to have ask Corey a question because the example that was given on stream here, and I understand we haven't delved into that particular person's situation, but that was a second grader that was being discussed. Is there an age? Do you think? Is there an age below which the child's decision on these things can't be substituted for the parent's decision? Like, at what's the age below which you will not go?
Probably when they can't like verbalize their wants and needs in any real like comprehensible way.
Wait, but hold on. Being able to know words is different than being able to understand the wants and
Sure,
needs.
and
that
understand
you're
like
verbalizing.
probably complicated concepts like whatever gender and sexuality. That's it. But like where the line between and a child understands concepts like those, I don't know that I have like a firm age. That's why I
So
tried to like distill it down to like same-sex marriage alone as a concept. Is that okay for a third grader?
So you would say third grade, roughly, is where you
no,
draw the line? No.
probably like elementary school, like grade 1, grade 2.
Wow. Okay.
But
Okay.
I'm not saying like everything's on the table at those levels. But that's
I
sort of
love
where
it.
But the
You're
point
saying
at which
you need age appropriate things, Corey.
But
to
the
do?
age at which
So this is crazy.
The
I'm not
opinion
against
of
that.
the child can be substituted for the opinion of the parent in terms of deciding, which way to go with regards to these identity issues. You're saying that once you hit about first grade, you could take over from the parent in terms of making those decisions?
What do you
The
mean by
child
take
can
over?
take over. The child
Uh,
can make those decisions without the input of the parent.
Well, so I would say the input of the parent should be coming from like the child engaging with the parent. Like if a child is not engaging with that's why I sort of brought up the example. If a
Sure.
child is sharing with the teacher information, okay, and pretty much sort of the implication is that there's no open lines of communication between the parent and the child, I would say you probably haven't done the greatest job of parenting. Just as if a teenager is questioning their sexuality at whatever age, 13 or 14, and they come out to their teacher, okay, and they don't come out to their parent, there's probably reasons for that. And you should take that
Okay.
seriously.
Hey, Corey, do you think first graders can consent to sex?
No,
Why?
because they don't have the cognitive ability to understand the concept of, consent, and that's too complicated, and biologically also as well.
So why are we not involving the parents if we're talking about their sexuality and their gender?
Wait, did you
so
say
sexual
first grade,
activity,
Corey?
sexual activity and sex of who you perhaps like identify with, I think are different concepts. Would you agree to that?
So what you're saying is the child can't consent to sexual activity because they don't have a developed understanding of sexuality and its implications, but they can
No, sexual activity.
determine for
Like,
themselves. Right. But that they can have enough of a concept to not involve the parents when talking about their gender and when talking about how they want to socially present and the clothing that they want to wear and the name they want to go by.
they can have I think, and I'm not saying absolute autonomy, but that's the thing. Like that should be negotiated, or at least there should be some sort of open line of communication between the parent and the child. Just as
So
ideally,
it's not about consent at that point, right? It's not about understanding. You're saying that sexuality is more complicated, but the way that you live in a social situation, changing your gender, changing the way that you present yourself, none of those things are complicated in that same regard that sexual activity is.
I'm not saying it's not. That's why if so, you're putting a lot on the table in terms of changing gender. There's a difference between someone questioning their identity and someone sort of committing to changing their gender. That's why we involve, well, hopefully, at least of the cases that I know of, if someone's actually trying to change their gender, we involve medical professionals, we involve mental health professionals, and hopefully that conversation like takes place and trying to get that child to understand, or maybe delay it when they're actually in a better place to understand. That's pretty much
Delay it says a lot, but what happens when
Yeah,
little
I agree, it
Timmy
does.
goes up to the teacher and says that they had sex with someone, regardless of gender? Do we inform the parents?
Before you
That's a
answer that, be
mandatory
Dander, thank you for the
report to
5
the-
subs.
It's a, yeah. Yeah.
Be Dander, thank you for the 5
Interesting,
subs. If we
isn't it,
get
that that's a
2
mandatory
more individual
report?
people. Like subs a hype train, which would be really great. So subs to channel, give bits or give subs. You can answer that. I want to get Lactoid because we're like already way over time. I don't want to keep everyone any longer.
Yeah. So can you repeat your question, Scott?
What happens when little Timmy in first or second grade goes to the teacher and says that they had sex with another student? Do you feel it's necessary to inform the parents?
I don't like morally or legally. I don't know the exact laws how they are in
Either.
terms of the United States.
Either.
I don't think it should be mandatory. No, not necessarily. That's at 16. If just as
No,
you know,
I said not 16. I said second grader.
Oh, sorry. Then I misheard you. So yeah. So I totally take your point in terms of that. That's where it's like if they don't understand if they don't understand what sexual activity is, and like it's a second grader. I heard 16. I apologize.
Are you
then that is a child.
So okay,
Fagan, are you still trying to refer to like the Little John situation? Because that kid was 13 years old.
No,
Okay.
this is obviously a hypothetical.
There was before. I thought you were talking about Little John. That's why I asked the clarifying question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Fair enough. Let's go to Lactoid.
Piecing some stuff together, Corey, you had asked some of the people on the panel if they believe in corporal punishment, and some of the answers were like yes, but only within an acceptable range if you don't leave scars, or if you don't like cause too much damage. For the people who think it's okay, this is a kind of interesting conundrum. I mean, if a parent is using corporal punishment within this what you deem to be like the acceptable range, when they hear their child has like a different gender identity and does this every time. Like at some point, does the school like have to stop telling the parent, or does the school have to keep telling the parent? Like if this kid got spanked every single day, because like not like no scars, no like bruises, but like spanked every day, because every day like the school had to call the parent and say, hey, like, you know, he's calling himself her again or something, and then like the parents spank the kid every day. Would we want to be like, hey, like that's kind of fucked?
You want my answer? Fanatic, Gibby, Scott.
I mean, like what? So you're saying that you have direct evidence that they're beating their child because of the fact that they socially transitioned?
Not beating. I'm saying corporal punishment within the range that you said was acceptable, like spanking.
No
And that
physical
you,
evidence.
right? And you know that they're spanked precisely for that reason.
Sure, yeah. The school knows that like this kid's getting spanked every day. Like no bruises, no scars, spanked every day.
I mean, like I feel like at that point you'd have a pretty solid case for permanent psychological damage.
Okay.
Right. Like I feel like an investigation would need to be done, obviously, but you're presenting evidence that is post investigation, right? Which is that we know that the child is being beaten for this specific reason. We know that for a fact, right? But I mean, like, yeah, if you're beating your child every fucking day for the reason that they claim to have transitioned in some other way or something, like I think you could probably pretty easily make a case that there's some permanent psychological damage, and then involve like the authorities to determine if it needs to go to like grandma or something like that.
What if it wasn't every day? What if like, do you think if a kid like does this and then the school calls like the parents, should the parents be able to use one instance of corporal punishment, or is corporal punishment off the table for this?
I mean, I think you need to prove permanent psychological damage.
Well, you're only going to
Well,
find that out like later on.
Why wouldn't we extend this to like any behavior? Right? So like,
well, I mean, it's like what you've described as
school,
probable cause for an investigation, right? You haven't like that's all you've described, right?
But is it though?
There's reason to investigate now and figure out what the fuck is going on.
Doobie.
Okay, so like I don't know what your position is, but like, do you think that parents should be able to physically discipline their children?
Who, me?
Yeah.
I think it's morally against what I believe is right to do. I believe in peaceful parenting, but I think legally speaking, the only thing that I can legally justify in terms of the non-aggression principle is it's a forestallment of your guardianship if you do some form of permanent damage. And that needs to be proven, and then once proven, restitution and having the child go somewhere else.
So if we found out that a parent was spanking their child for misbehaving in some way, do you think that'd be enough to open up an investigation to see if that spanking had any like long-term psychological damage?
I mean, again, we'd have to get into the details of the specific case, right? Because like initially Lactoid was saying it was one reason, and that it was repeated over and over and over and over and over again every day. It was daily, right? Like that is an impetus for an investigation, right? Now, a child saying once to their teacher, my dad, you know, didn't like that I called myself a girl and he spanked me. Like, I don't know that that's necessarily an impetus for an investigation if it only occurs once, but if it's repeated behavior and you're able to show, you know, and that they're going to the guidance counselor and things like that, that might be the impetus for an investigation.
Repeated anytime the child expresses. Hold on. So if it's like repeated, and not every day, but like anytime the child expresses that they have like this other gender identity, right? The parents
are we living in the panopticon? Like, I don't know. All I have is the child's word, right? Like, I don't know if the child's lying. I don't know if they're telling the truth. I don't know if they're exaggerating, right? But if you see them constantly saying, hey, I need someone to intervene, right? And it's like some form of repeated or excessive, you know, in terms of physical damage, then yeah, investigate. It doesn't seem, it feels like you're trying to overcomplicate something that's not complicated.
Parents are allowed to abuse their children as long as it only happens once.
Well,
that's the thing.
Is your name in the top center Lactoid, or is your name in the top center Lactoid or Matt? Like, I keep hearing like, who's top middle for me?
I'm Lactoid. Yeah.
Lactoid. Okay.
He's a Canadian.
Okay.
Nobody's
Um,
mad.
yeah.
Oh no! Why did you have to say that to me?
I'm not Canadian.
My
He
bias is
is. Don't
kicking in
deny
He's
it.
an
hard.
American
Stop. I'm
citizen
literally
of
gonna.
Swiss.
All
Do
right, so
not say
let me.
Switzerland. I swear to God.
So,
High
so the thing,
praise.
so the thing that I think you're digging at, which I guess I'll ask Fabian directly, if a child came, like if you're a teacher and a child came to you and said, you know, I said this to my dad, and then he started yelling at me, and how many times of that scenario exists for you where you feel like it should be something I should report to superiors?
Well, so when you say report, that's very different than investigate, right? Like you're
Reports
mandatory
lead to
reporter.
reports lead to investigations, though.
Not always, though, right? Like if
Yes.
CPS in many places are often bogged down and don't get to cases forever, and they dismiss shit all the
Right.
time.
So
CPS
districts
fucking sucks, right?
that
But
doesn't
it
that doesn't
depends on
answer
where
my
you are.
that doesn't answer my
It
question.
does
That's what I'm
answer your
saying.
question. There's a difference
Because
between
okay.
it doesn't. There's a difference between reporting one instance and whether or
Mhm.
not that one instance should immediately trigger an investigation.
But right
I
now, in
think
terms of the statute, it does. I think that's a point that Lactoid is alluding to.
right, but
Is
but
that
he's asking should. This is an ought statement. This is not
right?
a
Right.
statement of
So,
what is existing
and
in
I'm
reality. It's
saying,
a question of what is ought.
yeah, yeah. So I'm just trying to make it clear that in the current statute in most states, a single act of abuse, whether it be verbal or nonverbal, would lead to a report, which could lead to investigation. But the investigation is
Right.
varying from district to district. So I'm asking you how
But
many
again, you're
times,
couching the word in abuse, right? It's
because
contextualized.
that's how it's defined under the statute.
So
Like I'm
all
like
corporal
if
punishment is now abuse, and CPS
corporal
needs to
punishment is
investigate it all.
abuse. Corporal punishment is abuse. Why are we talk? Why are we trying to get like some? So I'm asking you, how many times do you think it would be for a report? So like, if a child said once, my dad said stop calling yourself a girl and hit me. You're saying that's okay. Like
I'm
you're
not
saying that
saying that's
one.
okay. Why are you
Okay.
so like I've
So
explained this so many
I'm trying to figure out, like, within your framework, how much of it would be tolerable under the current situation that we're in, under the
you're
current
you're
statute.
trying to quantify things that are contextual, right?
No,
Yes, you are.
it's just it's one or more than one.
It's not about one or more than one. If I have a kid that comes up to me and says, you know, hey, my dad told, I told my dad I was a girl, and like, as I was getting up, I think he tripped me on purpose. Like,
Mhm.
is that something that we should report? No, I think that sounds silly and stupid, and we should maybe like get them to schedule to talk about it more and figure out what's going on in the home life
So
just with the
what if
kid
it
alone.
happens every
But
time though?
right, exactly. And if it happens every time, right, then you have more
Mhm.
evidence like, okay, this might be a problem, right? Like there is a
Okay.
contextual situation there. But it could also be just once if like the daughter or son is like, hey, I came out to my dad as gay, for example, right? And my dad beat the living shit out of me with a phone book. Then it's like, yo, maybe we need to
What if
fucking
he
invest
what if he
immediately.
didn't beat the shit out of you and just took your car away? Or they just took their car away? Is that enough?
Clearly not abuse.
So
Oh,
can I ask a
okay.
clarifying
No,
question?
sir, we can't ask any
oh,
more questions. We're already
okay,
way over time. Joe Lewis, do
no
you have
problem.
anything else to say on here?
I'm good. I found the
Okay.
line.
All
It's
right,
all good.
we are way over time here. To my audience, we're going to continue on with our content here. The content does not end. We still have more for you, right? I let this go on for like a half hour longer, and I shouldn't have. But like things were getting really interesting at the end. But we still have more content for you, so stick right there. We're gonna have open panel right after this, and we're probably gonna be talking about more of this because I did not get to fight the way I wanted to fight. Okay,
I
so
feel you.
anyway, hit that follow button if you're new to the channel. Hit that follow button right now. Make sure notifications are on. So you know I'm going live 6 nights a week. Don't want you to miss out on any of the content. Whether I am on Twitch or on YouTube. I want you to follow the channel Expert Social Chat for our social media. We got a lot of it. We got Twitter. We got Discord, where we'll be having a walk on panel, which is right after this. And TikTok and also YouTube. Right. So like, comment, subscribe over there. All right. So I'm gonna give a outro to these guys. But before I even get to that, I do want to fight about this. I've been because I didn't get to fight on the grounds that I assumed we were going to. Some of the what we talked about was actually quite interesting. So Fanatic Doobie, if you guys want to come through, because I feel like there's a lot more a fight to have there, but that's if you guys aren't pissed. So anyway, we'll give an outro. Start with Fabian Liberty Scott. Thank you, Scott, for stopping by and all this. Like I hit up Scott on the regular, and I like that Scott's such a part of this community that like when he doesn't hear from me, he hits me up like, "Hey, is everything okay?" So and I actually do appreciate that. I appreciate that because it seems like he cares. He actually wants to be here. So thank you so much, Scott, for bye.
PrimeCayes, I may disagree with almost all of your political takes, but at the end of the day, hosting these debates, especially, I think more importantly than these, where all these Twitch streamers, like, we could debate anywhere, right? I mean, like, if I bug someone enough, I could get on, pretty much most panels. But like the ones that you host late at night, where you give so many fresh faces and people trying to test their chops and get known and stuff. I think that's a great service to Twitch politics in general. So anyways, I'm Scott from Fabian Liberty, anarcho-capitalist duo stream. Do a lot of philosophy, do some news, do some reactions, do a lot of interviews. So, come check us out. And, I think if this night showed anything at all, it's the right and the left have a really, really difficult time articulating extreme end cases because they don't have an understanding of human rights or what rights are. They have nebulous ideas based off of consequentialist principles that aren't really principled. They're subjectively biased. And without that framework, they have a really hard time having these conversations and they get lost in the weeds. And so if you want to learn more about those types of things and actually understand where rights come from and where they're based, you should come check me out.
Absolutely. Please do go check out Scott. Interesting person, interesting content. All right, let's go to our friend Lactoid. Lactoid, look. To honor your people. I feel like for so long we've been ignoring ignoring your ethnic background, ignoring your proud moose loving ways, right? So I appreciate you coming through, LARPing as an American, for our comfort here. So, thanks for being around, buddy.
So, despite your jokes, I do appreciate your effort to increase Swedish representation in media by inviting me here. The Lincolnberry people appreciate all of your efforts. But seriously, thank you for having me. Thank you for everyone who talked to me. Interesting conversations. My name is Lactoid. You can find me on Anti-Communism United, all one word, on Discord and Twitch. I am streaming now, and I would like to talk a lot about politics, which shouldn't be surprising. At the end of the day, I think war can be justified. I think we should stop Nazis who are killing Jews. I think we should stop communists who are killing landlords, right? We should stop all the authoritarian ideologies from killing people, ideally, whenever it's prudent. And yeah, I'll follow those beliefs to the end. So thanks.
But he doesn't mind capitalists like killing everyone else just for $1. Okay.
Vietnam was justified too.
There's monetary value there, so it's okay.
There's monetary value, so it works out. Thank you so much, Lacto. Lacto's an absolute amazing individual with misbegotten beliefs. But we love him so much. We appreciate him. Sprouticus, a real American, right? Which is why the stripes there are white. That's a dead giveaway, right? Canadians don't realize that it's the red, white, and blue. They go red, yellow, and blue.
It's tea stained. It's stained by tea. That's what they said.
How is the
Amazon
whole thing
says.
stained by tea?
I ordered it from Amazon. That's what it said. It said tea stained
Just
American.
say you
vegetables.
used it as a bed sheet, and the unfortunate accident happened.
I don't use it as a bed sheet.
Assumed when you said tea stained that for whatever reason the manufacturing
tea,
process,
not pee.
I know, not pee.
I'm not fucking R. Kelly.
Calls himself an American lawyer and doesn't follow the U.S. flag code.
Yeah, right. This is
That's
a desecrated
not law.
flag. This is desecrated flag.
U.S. flag
Look,
code.
just because Texas v. Johnson and U.S. v. Eichmann overturned it doesn't mean it's not a law in our hearts.
I know. Yeah, I don't know how you stained the entire fucking flag with tea. Amazing. Okay. No, I know not you,
Very-
but
it's
whoever
very
did it.
British of him.
Afternoon. It was a whole
Whoever did it.
afternoon.
Whoever
Listen,
did
Prime.
it.
Listen, Prime. He was there at the
Marinated.
Boston Tea Party.
Okay,
I was
there you
there.
go. All right,
And I
Sproutacus.
condemn them for being the BLM writers.
Real American hero Sproutacus, right? Thanks so much for being here as well.
You're
brother.
right. I also condemn the Bureau of Land Management. Fuck all 3-letter organizations from the state.
So you can find me at Twitch and Twitter at @thesproutacus. The Afghanistan topic, we shouldn't have left Afghanistan. We left Afghanistan in terrible hands. And now we do. Now the blood that is shed in Afghanistan is on our hands, and we have to deal with some of that guilt because we left them knowingly that the Taliban was going to take over. So the second topic, the law is unconstitutionally vague. A average person cannot understand the law and understand exactly where their framework is, or if they're doing something that's illegal or if they're doing something that's not illegal. So I am pro teachers not being confused about if they're doing something illegal or not illegal. So yeah. But go follow me, twitch.tv and Twitter at the Sproutacus.
Okay, thanks so much, friend. All right, let's go to our friend Aiko, who came through. Aiko, who came through at well, after what was it? An hour afterwards. It was really kind of you for to stop by here, Aiko. We had a hole here, and you helped go out. So please. You're talking. We don't hear you. You're still muted.
I believe you're muted.
He's muted.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. I was just saying today's the first day of the school year for me, so that's why I was home later than I normally would be. But anyway, better late than never. Also, I wanted to say, if anyone who knows me IRL knows that I'm a giant coffee nerd, such a coffee nerd that I even have favorite brands of coffee cups, and one of them is I will never stop making this joke whenever Fabian's on. This is ANCAP, one of my favorite brands of coffee cups. So I try to show this cup whenever Fabian's on stream, and no matter how many times I tell that joke, he never laughs at it. So we'll just have to see if he does next time. I don't stream yet. If I do, it'll be under this moniker here, so you can click on it and follow me in advance if you want to. But I don't know if I'll be streaming even a month from now. But if I am, I guess you'll be the first to know.
Thank you. All right, Corey Campbell.
Yeah. First, thank you so much, Prime, as always, for inviting me. Super grateful. I echo many of the same sentiments that Scott said in terms of like the space that you created. And all just a great thing for Twitch politics, bringing in new faces, I guess, like me. And also, I'm also super happy that you've brought in Lactoid as a Canadian. Like, we definitely am glad to see the Canadians are multiplying.
Yes, out his identity. Yes.
Even
we
though
can't make this a thing. We can't.
I'm not sure if I would want Lactoid as a Canadian, just based off of the white shirt, the particular skin tone, the white headset, and when I hear Lactoid, I think of white dairy milk. So I'm not 100% sure.
He just called you white. You gonna take that?
I said a particular skin tone. I didn't say
pale as hell. He's gonna take that.
But
damn.
Love being here. Thank you, Scott. Lactoid. It's been a marathon. Sprouticus, iCow, always a pleasure. Doobie, always a pleasure. Fanatic and Joe, a pleasure. I'm Corey Campbell, PhD candidate in biochemistry. I also work part-time at a biotech startup. On my streams, I cover science, research, politics, occasional workout stream. You can find me on Twitch, twitch.tv, Corey Campbell 84. On Twitter, Instagram, literally it's Corey Campbell. And again, thank you so much.
Corey,
That PhD income from Harvard, right?
I'm not gonna lie, Prime. When you were scratching
All
your
right,
head,
good. No guillotine for you.
I caught it out of the corner.
No guillotine for you. You're saved.
I caught you scratch your head at the corner of my eye, and I thought you were doing like the cross, like multiple times.
Corey,
Protect us from the Canadians.
I too pray to not convict violence on Canadians. It's really hard because once they're outed, it just.
Corey, I don't appreciate the colorism that you're expressing in our community. It's
I'm a filthy lefty. I can't help it.
If Biden
Man.
won't build a wall to the north, then we gotta hope that God will. Right. So let's go to
Trump built the wall in the wrong direction. Okay, that's all I'm saying.
Goddamn right. Let's go to our friend Doobie. Doobie, thanks so much, Dark Lord and Saver. Thanks for well, everything you usually do. Hopefully we can have you on for open because I didn't get to fight you like I wanted to fight you.
Oh yeah, I'll probably be around. Thanks for having me on. I am Doobie. I help run the politics server on Discord. Discord.gg/politics. It is the best and biggest politics server on the Discord platform, where we do a ton of crazy shit. So that's where you'll find me.
Hey, all right. And our friend Fnatic. Well, Fnatic, we would love to have you and open because like I didn't get to there's so many things I wanted to say. But yeah, we'd love to have you, buddy.
100%. I'm down. I might need a little bit of time. I'm gonna talk to someone real quick and probably call my girl for a brief spell before I can get back on another panel. I just want to say for the record, hearing the conversation, I'm pretty sure anybody listening to this, you can hear the absurdity of the idea that like people start developing like this notion that somehow that they should be the arbiters of what is good, and what should be taught to children, even like against parents' wishes. And things like that. That's the type of disgusting and scary rhetoric that's leading parents towards coming up with this sort of ideology, right? Because if you look at it, like anytime you start telling me you think you know better than me as a parent, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna lose my freaking mind. And that's what these parents are doing, and that's why they're coming up with this sort of legislation. This isn't some like boogeyman. The schools were already doing this. It was absolutely disgusting. When you start talking about things that are literally going to impact children for the rest of their lives, parents should be at the forefront of those decisions because they will be the ones involved with their children for the rest of their lives. And when schools say we know better and we're gonna create policies that like restrict your ability to do so, and it wasn't just in the presence of danger, it was just across the board, period. We're not going to tell parents about these kinds of things, right? Those kind of policies are absolutely disgusting. That sounds like grooming behavior. And when you find out about rapid onset of gender dysphoria, and you find classrooms where there's like 50% of the students are LGBTQIA+ and all the rest of the alphabets, then you start seeing like, it seems like something's going on here that's a little bit ridiculous, and we probably might need to pump some kind of brakes. I'm not going to decide where, but in any case, we need to do some things differently. And I'm glad that Florida is kind of taking that initiative. I think this bill is amazing. And I stand by it.
Let's go to then our friend Joe Lewis.
And Corey Campbell, check your DMs.
Well, dude.
Joe Lewis, our friend. Thanks for stopping
Fnatic
by.
is about to get some purple lighting himself.
Oh boy, I didn't say it'd be bad at him. But Joe Lewis, thanks for joining in. A whole unexpectedly happened on stream for our lineup here. So thanks so much for stopping by.
Yeah, education policy and procedures are fun. They're fun to talk about. I do take reservations when the state legislatures kind of like try to go past that and go past their departments of education, because I think that those fine employees do great work. So I think it's kind of a slap in the face of them in Florida. But again, like if there's anything that Donald Trump revealed as being the worst possible fascist, it seems like DeSantis is trying to reveal the actual fascism. So that's kind of fun to see. I'm not saying that's within here, but it's very fun to see DeSantis's evolution into this Republican butterfly. I listen, man. I'm school years back, baby. So my streaming schedule is kind of fucked. So if today is any indicator, I'm sure Aiko knows exactly what I'm talking about. Where it's like I'm just looking at the clock and going, "Damn, I really got to be up in 7 hours, huh?" So, but I do still stream, obviously, twitch.tv/Joe Lewis with 2 O's. It's gonna probably be weekends. But also since I'm a marching band director, it's probably not gonna be weekends until about April of next year when everything's said and done. But I'll try to put content in a bunch of different places. You can always follow me on Twitter. Every once in a while, I post a Umar meme and we can get a laugh out of it. But either way, this was fun. Always glad to be here.
And every so often, he stops by as a part of our crew here. So definitely do appreciate his time and all of you because I know you're all very busy. Okay, so we are going to go into our open walk-on panel right after this. anyone here can join us, but if not, that's okay. Thanks for spending your time, your energy, your knowledge, and your passion, my community. I know they appreciate it. Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you.
All right. All right.